Okay, fellow commissioners, staff, we're calling the Land Acquisition and Property Committee to order. This electronic meeting is being streamed live for the public to attend and record as a public record. Recording of the meeting will be available at www.ncwildlife.org. So with that said, we'll ask Margot to do a roll call.
Good morning. I'm going to do a roll call for our Land Acquisition and Property Committee members. Committee Chair, Tom Berry.
Yes, here.
Committee Vice Chair, Brad Stanback.
Here.
Committee Member Jim Ruffin. Committee Member Ray Clifton.
Here.
Committee Member Kelly Davis. Here. Committee Member Landon Zimmer. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Margot. Just preliminarily, I want you to know that Brad and I have gone over every one of these land acquisitions, phase ones and phase two. So hopefully we'll be able to answer your questions, and I hope we'll make some good decisions this morning. But with that said, what we'll do is let Ben Sullivan pick up the phase ones and go through them one at a time. And we welcome your comments and hope that you will join in with the thought process. These are very involved. We spent a lot of time on them, and I certainly commend staff for the effort they put through lining this stuff up. So, Ben.
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Morning.
We have a pretty full agenda today. We have 17 total items. We have 7 phase ones, 5 phase twos, and 5 other property matters to work through. So we'll start off with the Tweed Tract. The Tweed Tract is in Buncombe County. It is 82 acres. It will be in addition to Sandy Mush Game Land. We don't have a tax value on it, and the approximate asking price back in 2015 was $530,000. The rough estimate for what the owner's expectations are now are $1 million for the 82 acres. This is in line with the recent Snelson tract that we purchased on the Madison County side of Sandy Mush. So I don't think the owner's expectations are far off there. The property is accessed off of Martin Candler Road. It's still actively farmed, but a lot of it has been sitting for a couple of years. So the early successional habitat is starting to improve. The tract will connect several other small tracts of Sandy Mush, which you'll see probably a little better in our detail map. The property scored at a 3.643, and it scored well for habitat connectivity and diversity. It scored well for access and opportunities to the public for hunting and wildlife viewing. The potential grants and funding sources include PR, state funds, and private dollars. And this is a potential partnership with Southern Appalachian Highlands Conservancy. Staff recommend phase one approval.
Let's talk about the financing again. And do you have any better idea of how the breakdown would be with state funds, PR funds, and other conservation groups? I mean, is it
The ideal
100,000 each, or I mean, what's the vision here?
The ideal scenario here is 75% PR funding and 25% 25% that Southern Appalachian would bring to the table. So essentially a $750,000 to $250,000 split. If it appraises at 1 million, which we expect it'll be in that ballpark.
So do we have any questions about that? That's a lot of money. Take out for this particular project. We've looked at it. We think it's money well spent. It's a lot of connectivity there, and we feel like staff has sold us on the fact that it's what we need to do. Anybody have any questions?
Just point out, this is early successional habitat in the mountains, which is generally harder to find. We get a lot of more wilderness area that's intact forests and not a whole lot of diversity on it, but this gives us a lot of options on what's already a popular game land.
So to put it in perspective, what is that? Did I do that right? Let's see, we've got 500. Are you saying that we feel like that the price is going to be 530,000? 500, yeah, 30,000.
That was the listing price in 2015. We expect it to be nearly double that. All of that will of course be based on an appraisal.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's 6,000 an acre or so. So it is what it is, and we've discussed it. So, we'll just, I think, the committee members, are we all in favor of pushing this to, phase one?
Yep.
Okay, I think all in favor. Yay, we're good.
All right. Our next phase one is the Green Tract. This is a 14-acre tract in Haywood County. This would be in addition to Cold Mountain Game Land. This has been a property that our staff have prioritized and we've kept an eye on in the past. I think we made an attempt at this approximately maybe 10 years ago. The approximate asking price is $284,000. It's bringing about good access to this part of Cold Mountain Game Land along Lake Logan Road, Poison Cove Road. The tract is mostly wooded with hardwood, mix of hardwood and pine. Quite a few wildlife species. It's a biodiverse area. Good internal road network that will benefit our staff's management. This is from some past logging activity. And the property is listed and on the market. So the risk of development is high. It's one that we would like to pursue full force if possible. The overall land investigation score is a 3.922, and it scored well for filling an in-holding, and you can see it's connecting two pieces of Cold Mountain Game Land. You can see that in our detail map. Also scored well for access and connectivity. And potential grants and funding sources include PR, state dollars, and private funds. And this is another potential partnership with Southern Appalachian. And we recommend phase one approval.
Okay, as our discussion went on this particular piece of property, they're asking 20,000 an acre. Seems awful high to me. But it's an in holding, you might say, and it's only 1,400 acres, so it's 300,000, you might say. But as we discussed, we need to be mindful of the fact that $20,000 an acre, I don't care where it is a whole lot of money, and it will eat up our PR money and our North Carolina land and water money pretty quick. So we just want us to be aware that this is a lot of money to be paying for land anywhere. And but again, it'll have to be appraised for that, and that's what we'll end up paying. So the committee, I don't see any objections based on the facts that we've presented. So is the committee all in favor of moving forward with this? Ray, Brad?
Yep.
Kelly? All good? So we'll move this one forward also.
Okay. Our next tract, or rather assemblage, is the Falling Waters assemblage in Wilkes County. This is a approximately 6,500 acre property. This would be a new game land for us. The tax value of the assemblage is 14.4 million, and property is currently listed at 95 million, which is.
Oh, what? 95 million?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Excuse me for interrupting.
We're gonna
Chairman.
chew on that in a minute.
Tax value is low, asking price is way high, and it's been way high for 30 years.
It might stay there.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I'm sorry for interrupting.
But this is a partnership that, or a developing partnership that we have with the Conservation Fund. The overview of the tract, like I mentioned, it would be a new game land. It wouldn't be added to Buffalo Cove or Rendezvous Mountain. There's excellent access along the tract. I think there were 6 different access points. We toured this tract a couple months ago with Conservation Fund and some of our fisheries and land and water access staff, and I actually got the opportunity to attend this field visit. So gorgeous property, great internal road network, about 14 miles of internal road, which would be great for management. Several buildings exist on the property. Over 125 acres of wildlife openings. Our fishery staff have done some surveying on the site, and brook trout were found in Laurel Branch, I believe, upstream of one of the large waterfalls that was on the tract. 7 ponds were present, ranging from about a 1/4 acre to 1.75 acres in size. good opportunities for some warm water fishery management. And the property contained 2 miles of Stony Fork Creek with direct access along 1.4 miles of Stony Fork Road, excuse me. So great potential for fisheries management here. Stony Fork crayfish has been documented in Stony Fork Creek and in Flowers and Laurel Branch. So on the terrestrial and the aquatic side, very significant property our staff were excited about. Potential uses will be consistent with all of our other game land, hunting, fishing, hiking, bird watching, wildlife photography, and nature study. It scored at a 4.430. It scored well for terrestrial and aquatic diversity, overall size, access, and hunting and fishing potential. And potential funding sources for this one could include NC Land and Water Fund, Pittman Robertson funds. I listed state funds and private funds, but I think this may be a potential fit for Forest Legacy as well. That's something we could assess down the road. But we recommend phase 1 approval. I will say we've had a lot of discussion on this tract. We realize that it's a moonshot, and it's definitely going to be a long game to securing this and conserving this property. I think different routes could include a conservation buyer coming in, purchasing the tract, retaining a portion of it for personal use, and divesting of sections that are important to us to enroll in game land, purchase and enroll in game land. And another route is potentially ordering an appraisal and working with some of our conservation partners to take it down. But I think at this time, we've discussed potentially moving it through the phase 1 approval and seeing how things play out with potential conservation buyers that have interest, and then going from there. It's I know something Chairman Barry has pointed out is an appraisal is likely to be pretty pricey. That's something we've realized as well. So if we get to the point where we'd like to pursue with the conservation partner, we can receive a quote for that and see what those costs are at that time. But
Well, let me
Is
add a
this
little of that. Go ahead.
Is this a privately held piece of real estate right now?
yes, sir.
Interesting too, it's listed, and Gretchen Coley is a listing agent, just as a matter of information. And so we've had conversation, and I've expressed to her that we are just not interested in dealing on something that's $14,000 acres, $95 million. I have talked to Tim Sweeney's man, Joe Kelleher. They value this stuff in the $2,500 an acre. Just says it's rough, and they wouldn't even think about acquiring it for anything more than that. Talked to Bill Holman, talked to him last night about this and how we could partner and try to figure out some way to make this thing work at some reasonable number. Also talked to Mike Leonard last night about this property. And I think the consensus here is that we approve it for phase 1, and that we go through this appraisal process. And I would like to suggest that we get first of all, a price on what it costs to appraise this property. And at one point, Brad and I felt like that maybe we just ought to let some private buyer get his own appraisal, get it done, and then buy it or whatever, and then we'll see how things fall out. But after talking to Mike Leonard last night, the thought, well, they said they would pay half of it. And I don't know what other partners we might be able to get involved to join in on what it would be. But I think at a minimum, we need to get an idea about what kind of money we're talking about, just do an appraisal. My thought was it's going to cost $30,000 just to get an appraisal. And something that really feels like it's so far out of reach, even though it's got some good stuff, we need to proceed cautiously about what kind of we expose ourselves to.
Tom, who is Mike Leonard? Who did you represent?
He's a conservation fund. Bill,
Yeah, he's part of our team.
he's part
Has
of
a
our
lot of
team.
experience, all around the country. Big land.
He's been involved with this particular tract going back
Long
for
time.
decades, I think.
At least.
It's
Brad,
been
what's-
on and off the
And
market for a
he's
long
best
time.
friends, I'm gonna
Always
say
with
best friends,
too
friends
high
of
a
your
price.
dad and Tim Sweeney. And, they oftentimes bring projects to us, and he is a extremely good friend of the land committee.
Brad, you seem to know a little more about it. What kind of price should be on this per acre? I mean, we're at 14,000. What should it be?
I don't know. I think getting an appraisal should be the first step. So that would be a
We're gonna spend a
reasonable
lot of
price.
money on appraisal that
Yep.
we may not be able to afford anyway. Is that correct?
Yeah, or
That's
some sort
right.
of public ownership may be good, even if
That's
it's
fine.
not the wildlife.
I
commission.
get it. That's
I
the
mean, we don't
big
need to spend
concern.
money on something we can't afford.
That's why the suggestion would be that we find out how much this appraisal is gonna be. The conservation fund has agreed to pay half of it. And there's something to be said
But pay half of it. and
of
we
the
don't pay-
appraisal.
Oh, okay.
Excuse me. Yeah.
In my,
I tried hard on that angle, but that didn't work out. Mike said he didn't have a $50 million.
in my discussion with Mike Leonard about this, he pointed out that, we all have seen from the last two projects, mountain land is high priced. This is foothills land, and some billionaire may buy it as a private estate, in which case most of the habitat is going to be protected. He doesn't think it would work very well as a real estate development. He knows of several others at this elevation in the mountains that have failed. There's nobody coming up from the triangle or the triad area is going to stop here when they can drive another 40 minutes and really be up in the high mountains where the summertime temperatures are much cooler. This is not going to be that much cooler than the Piedmont. And it probably isn't viable for a big real estate.
Those are
development.
great points.
That may change
Very, very good
over
points.
time, but it's
And-
not like mountain land, it's low foothills land.
And personally, through experience and watching, big dollars go out for these properties, people, to find somebody that's gonna pay $95 million and if the land's really worth $3,500 an acre, it's probably not gonna happen. Shrewd buyers, for these guys that have a lot of money that can do this, they might buy a fancy car, they might buy some whatever, but they don't normally pay way over what a piece of property's worth. And my experience has been. But I would ask you, and then let's move on here. What is the process if we decide we want to know what the appraisal is going to cost and be sure we get the partnership with the conservation fund? Tell us how you're going to do that if this proceeds to further into phase one.
I think there's some different options for it, but I think if we approved it today as a phase one, we could work with the Conservation Fund to get a quote on an appraisal. And once we have that value, we could communicate it and we could see what we're working with on the 50-50 split. I don't know that it would necessarily dictate it coming back into the committee for approval to spend money on that appraisal, but it could surely be communicated and we could discuss it. Definitely with the director's office. I mean, that's a decision. We're probably looking at $10,000 to $15,000 worth of spending. Something we would involve them on. Be sure they're comfortable with. We could keep you in the loop as well. That's just a suggestion, but
Good question. I have a question here.
So I don't want to overthink this, but I don't understand why we even get an appraisal unless the seller says we would consider something. I mean, if it appraises for 50 million and they're asking 95 million and they're like, we're not taking a dime less than 80 million.
We're wasting our
We're
resources.
wasting $1. I mean, it's ridiculous. And I can't comprehend the buyers or sellers asking 95 million, but they would really take 50 million. I mean,
I don't think they want to sell it.
I don't
do
think they want to sell it either, or I think they're hoping that needle in the haystack comes along, and I'm good to let them hope for that needle in the haystack. I can tell you this, guy, not that finding 6,400 acres in one block is easy, but there's a lot of real estate up that way for sale for half of this amount of money. Again, it's not gonna be 6,400 acres, but
Chairman, I
you
just
might
don't
could get a
want us to-
lot better piece of real estate. May only be 2,000 or 3,000 acres, but you could get a lot of real estate up that way for $5,000 an acre.
Just Mr. Chairman, I just don't see us waste a lot of resource on this at the price it's at now. I mean,
Well,
and Brad said it's been here for sale for off and on the market for a very long time, so.
And as
Let it
prices
just
have
be on the
gone up,
market.
so.
the seller
just
has
to
been
answer your question,
unreasonable on price from the get-go.
I mean,
so
again, it's,
the committee ended up exactly what you're saying when we got off the phone the other day, Ray and David, that we would not be involved in the appraisal. Let somebody else get it appraised and let somebody else take it down. And then if they want to play with us in a bargain sale, however they want to do for us to get involved. The fear is that that appraisal might come back bigger than if the conservation fund was running the show and getting the appraisal. But I can live with and I can support that position of why should we spend any money as we left it the other day. So I'll ask our committee, Brad, what's your thought there? We've talked this thing through twice.
I don't,
Chairman, can I add one comment?
Please.
Or Brad, or his question? So could we do what you asked, go and get the cost of the appraisal with the conservation fund covering half of it, and then bring that back to committee for further approval? I mean, Ben suggests we could do that, we don't have to, we don't typically do that, but since this is such a talking point, that be the next step, and as part of that discussion with the seller, ask their attitude about selling close to appraised value, which is part of our conversations with the sellers anyway, when it comes to appraised value.
And I was there too, and David made an excellent point, though. If they're not willing to come down there, why even bother? Why spend $1 when you don't have to? So I think those two have to go hand in hand. The price of the appraisal and are they willing to negotiate at that level have to be the same conversation. They can't be two different
well, here would
conversations.
be the easiest partner on the appraisal, the seller. I mean, I was doing a deal the other day and I asked a guy, how'd you come up with 3.5 million? I mean, if you can explain that to me, I may be, but his comment was, well, we just feel like that's what I don't feel like it's worth, 3.5. So we're not gonna do a deal. I cannot comprehend at $95 million. And I agree 100% with Brad. This is foothills. This is not desirable developmental real estate. This is D.R. Horton is not looking in Wilkes County. So
Chairman Barry, two quick comments. When you showed us all the potential new game land sites as you're looking to go to areas that are underserved in North Carolina, the attractiveness is there are very few large tracts like this. My recollection is this doesn't fall within your target range.
That's correct.
So,
That's another issue.
yeah, kind of, while we love to have as many game as we can for our increase in population, it doesn't really serve the purpose of trying to find some in areas that are underserved.
I wholeheartedly agree. So, I would just throw out a proposal is that, we move it to phase one with the agreement that we're not going to spend any money on appraisal. And that, we see how these potential buyers want us, we just play it out, I guess you'd say, without spending any money. And I think, doesn't necessarily follow your guidelines, but I think that's what the committee is headed to. And I that's the way we ended up yesterday, day before. So, all in favor of proceeding in that direction, not spending any money, but, go ahead and stay involved.
We are gonna be spending money because we're gonna be spending resources on making that happen. Why can't we, is there some way we can just make a phone call like Dave just said and said, where did you come up with this number at? If they can produce how they came up with that number, then it may be that we move in a different direction. But if they can say, well, this is just what we think is worth. I mean, I think everybody at this table can tell you this. I have a hard time.
well, let me ask one more question. I don't want to
Sure.
beat this thing up anymore because I think we
Yeah.
now know where we're headed, but
Yeah.
I mean, is there a conservation partner that even is willing to spend 90 million, 70 million, 50 million? I mean, if the odds of finding I'm a bang for the buck. I truly believe when you get a seller that's asking $95 million, guys, you're not dealing with somebody that really wants to sell a piece of real estate. I just think you're wasting your time, you're wasting your energy, listen, I'd love to have it too, but I'm a move on kind of guy. I mean, the odds of somebody asking 95 coming down to 50, 60 is close to zero. The odds of an appraisal being more than 30 or $40 million is so.
And my point is, if we're gonna create a new game land, it needs to service Charlotte, Raleigh, or the Triad.
Yeah.
We probably don't have too many bullets like this in our gun. Of course, there's not very many tracks like this. But it's kind of in an area that's out of the way.
I think we're all in agreement that we push forward, but we don't spend any money.
Make phone calls.
I mean, that's what it is now, yeah.
I want to make sure I know what's expected of Ben and his team. So we're gonna pass it by phase one, but not do anything. That's the pass, that's fine. I just want to make sure we're clear.
I guess staff stay in touch with the conservation fund to investigate, but no actual outlay for an appraisal or anything expensive, and just see if any more information is forthcoming.
Could you talk to John Coley? That'd be appropriate.
I don't think so. I think Gretchen.
Yeah, we need to be careful about even having conversations about that at all.
Are you not passing phase one? Can we bring it back again as a phase one when we get more?
That's what
Yes,
I'm
that's
saying,
what
right,
I'm
that's the-
thinking.
Yeah,
Let's do
bring
that.
it back some other time.
Maybe then you
If
make
there's something else comes up, but in
In-
my.
Yeah, 10 or 15 years from now, when we're all gone. bring it back up.
And the endowment fund is $200 billion.
So it's the back burner, is the action.
Yeah,
Back
all right,
burner.
Yeah, there you go.
okay, all right,
Back
now,
burner. Back burner.
let's see, Brad, why don't you, propose this in the form of a motion of what you just heard?
That we decline to move this to phase one, but entertain looking at it as a phase one again after there's more information available.
I totally concur. So, other committee members, we're all in favor of doing that? Let's do it, move on.
Sorry.
Can I get a second on that?
That's it.
Excuse me, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Yeah. No more discussion? Okay,
All right. We
all
can
right,
move forward to the Richard Ridge tract. This is still in the mountains. This is a 341 acre tract in Caldwell County. This is a partnership with Foothills Conservancy. It would be in addition to Buffalo Code Game Land. Tax value on it is 625,000. Biological overview. There is good access to this tract from the Wisnet Road. There's Rich Cove and Oak Hickory Forest present on the tract, 7 natural communities present. As identified by Natural Heritage, the tract does protect some headwater streams, which is important for our aquatics. There are 8 species listed as rare and as watch list species by Natural Heritage. Tract will be good for hunting, big game as well as small game. The overall land investigation score is 3.176. It scored well for compatibility with adjoining lands, connectivity and buffer, as well as habitat conservation for SGC and species. Potential grants and funding sources would include NC Land and Water Fund, Wildlife Restoration, PR dollars, and state funds. And we recommend this one for phase 1 approval.
I don't think we saw any real issues here. The value for the dollar seems to be reasonable. It's, joins in with other game lands we've got there.
This one
So
is,
did we have, Brad, do you remember any criticism we had of this?
no, I think
I think
it's
we just
probably
agreed that we need to push it forward.
similar elevation in the
Right.
foothills
You need a
to
motion
the
on that?
one we just looked at, but this is under 2,000 an acre.
Yeah, do you need a motion? on
Yeah, go ahead.
that? Make a motion, we move forward with this one?
Second,
Mr. Chairman?
any
do all the
discussion?
phase ones
Excuse
other
me?
than-
Yes.
Do all the phase ones other than the Fallen Waters together?
Okay, okay.
The
right.
ones you're gonna
All right,
recommend.
so you're saying this is the last phase 1? Yeah.
No, sir, we've got a few more.
Got a Jones tribe. see here.
I don't
Okay,
think
so
they're
we
asking
agree. We
enough for
second
those
with no more
2%.
discussion, all in favor?
I think we're gonna do all the phase ones at once. We got a couple more, don't we?
Yes, yes, ma'am. Yep, we have.
Well, yeah, we do, but we need to take them individually to decide whether we want to put them in that group or not, correct? So we've agreed as a committee to put, to take it up together with the others we've approved.
I think it would be recommended to concur, and then at the end of his presentation, maybe just do all the ones that you're recommending.
All
to
phase
phase
ones.
phase
All right,
one.
is everyone, a committee or concur?
Yep.
Okay, all right, we'll do it that way. Simple enough.
All right, moving forward to the Port Palace tract. This tract is owned by Port Palace LLC. It's 237 acres in Bladen County. This will be in addition to Whitehall Plantation Game Land. Approximate tax value is $320,000. There's good access from NC 53 and Bivens Bridge Road. It will improve access to the Marshall Tract, which is another property that we are actively pursuing with TNC, the Nature Conservancy. Natural Heritage identifies this tract as a high conservation value tract. It's within the Conkill Bay Complex Natural Heritage Area. 76 acres of it are Carolina Bay, and around 57 acres are open ag field. About 30 SGCNs are likely to occur on the tract. It's scored at a 3.520. It scored well for compatibility with adjoining lands, connectivity and buffer, hunting and viewing opportunity, and conservation of SGN species. You can see the Port Palace tract is outlined in bright red, and the Marshall tract that we are actively pursuing is tinted with a red shade. And you can see, you know, it's a large tract. I believe it's 3,297 acres in size. So building on that building on our, I guess, existing work.
They're not adjacent though, are they?
They do touch, and it's tough to see. But there's a strip of the Marshall tract there, and TNC also has a bridge tract that will connect it all together. So big
So
puzzle
show us
piece.
how big the Marshall track is. We're,
It's right here.
It's shaded in light red. It's just over 3,000 acres
right,
That shaded.
Yeah.
Right there.
across NC 53 from the existing game land.
Now, that's a farm that on this tract that you're looking at, Port Place, that's a farm that has been shut down. Is that correct?
I don't know that it's been shut down. It was a turf farm. And so we would have to come in and do some habitat work to convert from turf production over to potentially a dove field in that open area, but
So it was not pork production, just turf farming.
currently I think it's turf. There's not any infrastructure listed in the phase one.
But
I
you
think,
there are hog lagoons or any of that stuff on
Yes, sir.
property. So
yeah,
Yes, sir.
I see where you're going.
Mm.
None of that was
It's
noted in
been
phase
shut down
one.
for many years.
So you're doing environmental on that?
The phase one is we conduct a site visit, staff conduct a site visit, and we flag any environmental concerns.
Well, knowing, I mean, you look up the history, if there are hog lagoons on there, we need to certainly they make.
And I will mention too, this is a potential land and water fund application. We plan to submit a land and water fund proposal come February. If the proposal is successful with them, they'll perform a site visit, and land and water fund typically doesn't hesitate in requesting an EA if an EA is needed. We had a pile of concrete on one tract that we couldn't determine exactly what was under it. We ordered an EA. So I think as it moves through the process, if.
I got you.
Yes, sir.
As long as you radars on them, fine.
Yes, sir.
it certainly seems like the value is there, and I think that's the way we ended up talking to it. So, this committee concur with staff's recommendation to approve. Brad?
Yeah.
Jim? Ray?
Yeah.
All right, move on.
We're still at the coast. This is a 291 acre tract, still at Whitehall Plantation Game Land in Bladen County. The approximate tax value is 66,000. This still access along Bivens Bridge Road. It will also continue to build on that Marshall tract. This property shares nearly 1.5 miles of boundary with the Marshall tract. Good upland portion. A good portion of the property is upland longleaf pine on the sandy ridges. It's also part of that Conkill Bay Complex Natural Heritage Area. 35 SGCNs are likely to occur on the tract. It scored at a 3.806, and it scored well with compatibility to adjoining lands, connectivity and buffer, hunting and viewing opportunity, and conservation of habitat for SGC and species. Potential grants and funding sources for this tract include NC Land and Water Fund, Wildlife Restoration Funds, and state dollars. And I'll mention too, this tract is a partnership. We're in partnership with the Nature Conservancy. We're in the initial stages of working with them, but TNC would be taking lead. We would likely be providing some match. And staff recommend phase 1 approval of the Jones tract.
So we concur in our preliminary meeting. Obviously, the value is there. I hard to believe it's going to appraise for as low as the tax value, but anywhere close is acceptable. So so committee, do we concur with staff's recommendation?
Yes.
All concur. We concur. Yep. Move on.
Okay, our final phase 1 is a potential boating access area. We have been in conversation with the landowner. It appears as though leasing this existing boat ramp will be the best way forward. So we're presenting this as a lease concept. It's a 3.2 acre tract in Carteret. It's between Cedar Point boating access area and Haywood Landing boating access area. It's near to our White Oak River impoundment, our permit hunts there. And this area is also heavily used during fall trout season. Several staff have voiced this is an important tract for our acquisition, for our access program. It scored fairly low because it only scored on one category. It scored at 2.533. It scored well for access and fishing and hunting opportunity, since this area would be used by waterfowl hunters as well as fishermen. And potential grants and funding sources for this lease are state funds. And I'll mention too, we see leases fairly often, oftentimes they're with the municipality at no cost. This lease would be, we would order an appraisal to determine an evaluation, an annual cost to us, and we would also work towards setting a lease term with the landowner. So if this moves forward from phase 1, we would bring it back with a lease rate as well as a lease term. And I will mention too, we're not interested in entertaining short-term leases. We would like to see at least a 10-year lease in some of our conversation. But again, all of that to be negotiated with the landowner. And staff recommend phase 1 approval of the lease concept.
So we went through this pretty thoroughly and talked about, number one, why aren't we just buying this property? Obviously, they just don't want to sell it. And that the advantage or the interest in here is because of its location and the way it'll serve, what it'll serve. Also, remind me again about the infrastructure that's there already that we don't have to repeat. It's pretty much ready to use.
Yes, sir. There's an existing parking area. The bulkhead is in good condition, and there's a existing 1-lane ramp that's in good shape. And you can see the floating dock that extends off of that ramp. So minor repairs to get it up and running.
So, and we discussed that we would, as you mentioned, that we want as long a lease as possible. I mean, is it saving us money? I'd like to think it is. It all depends on how the numbers fall out. So that was a charge that we initiated, and why not 20 years? So anyway, any comments on that? There's a lot of different ways to look at this.
Where is the next available wildlife ramp to this property?
We went through
Cedar
that.
Point boating access area,
Long
which
way.
is, I believe, Morehead City, and then Haywood Landing is
But how many miles would that be?
I don't have the miles
Roughly 5 miles, 10 miles, 50 miles.
by river. I'm not exactly sure to tell you today. I could get that information.
No. I just didn't
It's,
know if there was something right next door, then maybe that's one thing, but obviously if it puts a nice place for people to put their boats in, and we don't have any other place here, then it'd be a great acquisition.
There is a good gap. We feel as though this is filling a void in our program, and especially being that White Oak Game Land and White Oak River Impoundment are just around the bend from this access point. It would reduce the distance that our waterfowl hunters have to travel for permit hunts. But I can get you that information.
No. I mean, I defer to staff and you say, yep, it fills in a gap. That's all I need to know.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
It's a good ways.
Okay. I
And
appreciate all
I
these.
can't answer
all
that
these specific
specifically,
answers
but
that I'm getting into.
you can just look at,
You weren't math majors, were you?
geographically, you could look at it and know it's a long way. Okay, committee, do we concur? Agree with staff? Okay, we're in favor of moving this one along.
That was our final phase one. So we've got a total of 7 phase ones that we reviewed today for your consideration.
I move we accept all the phase ones except Falling Waters and have that brought back to us in the future with more information.
Do I hear a second? Any discussion? Anybody bring any specifics of it? So we, a vote, all in favor?
Aye.
We good with that? You good with that, Margot? Okay, let's move along to phase twos.
Yes, sir. Our first is the Jordan Timber Tract. This is a partnership with the Nature Conservancy. It's a 2,000 acre assemblage in Scotland County. It will be in addition to Sandhills Game Land. You can see in the overview map that it is connecting 2 of our existing game land blocks. So that's one of the biggest selling points for us. There's great potential for longleaf restoration. Several species, important species are listed and known to occur on the tract, including Carolina pygmy rattlesnake, Bachman sparrow, as well as red cockaded woodpeckers. It's a great property to enroll in our prescribed fire program that's ongoing at Sandhills. It's scored at a 4.269. It scored well for adjacency to existing game land, scored well for hunting and viewing opportunities, as well as SGCN and game species. The property appraised at $3.2 million. We will be purchasing it from TNC at a bargain sale of $1 million. And this will be funded with a NC Land and Water Fund grant that was awarded this past cycle. The 5-year estimated stewardship and revenue are $258,750. This is to cover boundary establishment, reforestation, and wiregrass plugs for the understory establishment. And you may ask, why are we including reforestation at the front end? This assemblage does have a timber deed associated with it. Jordan Timber has the rights to harvest the loblolly off the tract. That is ongoing and it will likely extend into our ownership. TNC has been replanting longleaf as the tracts are clear cut. We plan to continue that and establish a native stand of longleaf, or a stand of native species of longleaf. And staff recommend phase 2 approval of the Jordan Timber Tract.
Just remind everybody, that this went through phase 1 into phase 2. But oftentimes we don't, get into the weeds as much as we might need to. So we need to look at this thing and scrutinize it. In this case, I don't think there's any issues at all. I think it's a no-brainer. But I just want to remind you, the phase 2s are not totally vetted by committee or the commission. We approve them and then staff comes back with their recommendations. So they're open for further discussion. Don't think that just because they're phase 2s that we can't kill it or do something different than what's proposed. But anyway, in this case, it's a no-brainer. Just want to bring that fact up. So
we're gonna
committee,
we're gonna take all the phase 2s too, right? We're not gonna go in.
no, well, we're gonna concur and then do the same
Yeah,
thing.
let's do that.
All right, everybody.
Mr. Chairman, I will note for the record tomorrow, I'll need to take a recusal on this. I have immediate family members that are employed by Jordan Lumber, and I personally do business with Jordan Lumber. I will be taking a recusal tomorrow on this. Just note that for the agenda.
Duly noted. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, everybody concur? Fred, nod, everybody, good, okay. Next,
Our next tract is the Upper Reedy Creek tract. This is in Warren County. This is a 485 acre tract, would be in addition to Embro Game Land. The approximate tax value is $469,000. Access to the tract is off Warrenton Embro Road. This would bring about access to a portion of Embro Game Land that currently does not have access. Significant aquatic species occur downstream in Reedy Creek. There are a couple stands of mature oak on the tract. The majority of the tract is comprised of 18-year-old loblolly and recently reforested loblolly that has been planted within the last 2-3 years. Good road network, about 1.6 miles of well-maintained roads, excellent deer and turkey hunting opportunities. This was an important tract for staff. This is one I actually made the field visit for and really enjoyed seeing it. You could tell it had the characteristics of being an excellent hunting property. Overall land investigation score, 5.220. Scored well for hunting and viewing opportunities, public access, biodiversity, and timber harvest potential. And I want to be clear, and please ask any questions if you have any, but the valuation process on this tract, we started with an appraisal. The appraisal came in at $795,000. We presented that to the landowner. The landowner came back, and after reviewing the appraisal, he found that the appraiser did not value his timber, his standing timber. And we felt a fair valuation would be to go back and add a timber appraisal and add that value to the bare land value that was presented in the first appraisal. I don't know that we've presented this situation recently. It's something we've done in the past, and it's a process that State Property Office approves and even recommends when we end up in this situation. We propose to purchase the tract at $1,253,364. That's the sum of the bare land and timber. And we propose to use a Pittman Robertson Wildlife Restoration Grant to purchase. I'll also mention we applied to NC Land and Water Fund in the 2023 cycle. We were not funded. The property, the riparian section of the property is already conserved via conservation easement, leading to a low score with Land and Water Fund. So this is why you typically see at least a Land and Water Fund line item here. And I just wanted everybody to know we attempted it. This is why we're proposing to purchase solely with PR. Estimated stewardship is $11,970 for boundary establishment, establishment of the parking area, and installation of gates. We recommend phase 2 approval of the Upper Reedy Creek tract.
So when you say Pittman Robinson grant, we get about $30 million a year, I think, something like that from Pittman Robinson.
Last year, it was
Yeah,
approximately
last
30.
year. Now, do we keep a running track of what we've used? And could we ask you how much is left in Pittman Robinson after all the many divisions use whatever they're entitled to?
So in 2023, on that Pittman Robertson appropriation, we had an approximate budget of $7 million for land acquisition projects. And I'll mention too, that's the last line item in that budgeting meeting. We work through and cover operations. We cover everything else prior to getting to land acquisition. Out of the $7 million budget, this $1.2 million we're proposing to spend is well accounted for. We're not losing out on another acquisition opportunity by funding this with $1.2 million.
Okay, we talked about this, but I think the committee and other members of the commission would be interested in this. We don't spend all that money. Is it like some government funding stuff? You got to give it back, or do we all be sure we spend it all? What's going on there?
So we have a staff person that tracks our Pittman Robertson spending. There is it's a federal aid term, but there's a safety margin set. And as long as we spend down within that safety margin, we're not reverting funds year to year. And we have not reverted. I confirmed with Brian after our pre-meeting this week, we haven't reverted any funds in quite some time. I didn't track back a certain distance, but
Would be an
we're not in
interesting
danger of reversion.
conversation and maybe even a presentation of how we use that money and how different divisions of the agency use it. And I don't know really what you mean by diversion, and I don't know if that's a return or what, but, it's, we need to obviously buy as many game lands as, or land to revert to game lands as we can. But anyways, we'll talk a lot more about that.
Yes,
I think
sir.
it's interesting.
Mr. Chairman, on this track, if I may, 50% 18-year loblolly and 50% replanted. But I see no revenue estimates. Are y'all
Right. That's the
working the
next,
timber program?
that's the next question.
Those are just 5-year estimates. So we don't plan to harvest any timber in the short 5-year term. We do plan to, there will be another thinning on that 18-year-old timber. Likely just after that 5-year window.
That's what I was gonna say. Typically, it's 10, 20, 30, a third. So
Yeah,
it seems like it fell within that 5-year window.
yes, sir.
I had another question on that for the
Please.
land appraisal. Did that take into account the existing conservation easement? Which on riparian areas, it's typically all the land within 50 feet of a stream. Was that deducted from the land appraisal?
I'm not entirely sure, Commissioner Stanback, and I know we mentioned that previously, so I apologize for not having that. I could get you an answer afterwards. I could likely have it pulled up here shortly and maybe come back to it towards the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should
So
be.
he's obviously taking appraisal, so if that is not in the case, then the appraisal would be some less. My guess is it is. I guess the request would be to look into that, and if it is, has not been taken into consideration, we need to make that note as to the value of the appraisal. Fair enough, Brad?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, you good with that? Ben?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Good questions. You'd think that in the stewardship programs, it would show a little income coming from all that timber, but I think you've answered the question, so there will be, but there's no estimate right now. So, committee, do we approve this to be, go for final approval, phase 2? Okay, let's make a motion.
No, wait, she said we're gonna take them all. at one
We're
time.
gonna do, okay, we'll do it that way. Yeah, okay, so we concur.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, everybody, Brad, concur?
Yep.
Jim, Kelly? Okay, all right, moving along.
And
Lee track.
Commissioner Stanback, let me give you a little more complete answer on that. Before we get the project to this point, State Property Office orders the appraisal and State Property Office real property agents review the appraisals. And if they flag anything, or if staff flag anything, we take that back to the appraiser. In this case, the standout was the bare land and the exclusion of timber. Nothing was flagged by state property and they approved this appraisal. So just to give you a level of confidence in that, they have reviewed it, but I'll still look into
Maybe there's not enough land close to a stream to make a material difference.
yes, sir. Okay, moving forward, we have the lead.
Committee member has some concerns, so let's follow up and give them an answer and say it was or what.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Next up is our lead tract. This is 11 acres in Bladen County. This will be in addition to Suggs Mill Pond game land. Tax value for this tract is $20,806. This will be a new access point to a portion of Suggs Mill that currently does not have access. There's mature longleaf pine scattered across this 11-acre tract. 30 SGCNs are likely to occur and 190 feet of lake run stream passing through the tract. The overall land investigation score is 2.402. Scored well for access and compatibility with adjacent lands. It appraised at 57,000. We presented that offer to the landowner. The landowner declined at 57,000 and the state property office negotiated a purchase price of 70,000. We mention all the time that we pay appraised value, and that is our standard. If it's a high priority tract that we don't want to pass up on the opportunity, we have state property office has a small margin for wiggle in the price. So this negotiation was done at our approval and with our support. We proposed to purchase the tract with wildlife restoration PR dollars at 70,000 at a cost of 70,000, and the 5-year estimated stewardship are $4,650 to include boundary establishment and establishment of a parking area for the public to access the tract. Staff recommend phase 2 approval of the lead tract.
Committee concur.
So,
Any objections or discussions? Move it into the bucket of approval. Okay, move on.
We've got a easy one here. We've got a donation. I think it's our only donation this time. This is a 102 acre tract in Ashe County. This is a partnership with Blue Ridge Conservancy. It would be in addition to Three Top Mountain Game Land. The tax value on the tract is approximately $250,000, and the approximate asking price, again, this is a donation. Biological overview, the property is made up of majority hardwood forest types. It is a part of the Three Top Mountain Natural Area, with areas ranked exceptional and rare by Natural Heritage. Quite a few SGCNs are known to occur in this area, including ruffed grouse, box turtle, and northern long-eared bat. The property scored at a 3.650. It scored well for overall biodiversity, connectivity, as well as hunting and viewing opportunity. And this is also filling an in-holding for us, as you can see in the detail map. Acquisition plan, this will be a donation from BRC. And the 5-year estimated stewardship is $17,833 to include boundary and parking area establishment. And staff recommend phase 2 approval.
Committee concur.
Yep. I had a question about, is that a pipeline or power line right away cutting?
Power line right away. Yes, sir.
I guess I got a question.
Please.
If it's a donation, why are we going through phase 2? I mean, why didn't it come to us as we're gonna approve it or not approve it? It being a donation, if there's some not much stewardship.
You
cost.
mean, did it go through phase 1?
No, we don't need to go. I don't
I'm
need a
just saying,
donation.
is there, I think as a matter of protocol, it needs. to be-
Okay. I just-
needs to Look at it and say yes, and then we move on.
It's a donation, though. I mean, it's hard to.
But fair point. But you don't want to have a piece of property donated to you that you don't want.
But no,
That's
no, no,
liabilities,
no,
and so
I'm
that's why
saying,
you go through the process.
oh, okay. I thought maybe, isn't there another phase we got to go through after this?
No, this is for approval.
So this is,
here.
this is, this
This
is,
is it.
this is it. Oh, okay, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but
I didn't
they
know
have
if
to
you
do
were
their due
gonna-
diligence, make sure we don't get a.
Right, okay, I'm
Something we don't
sorry. I'm missing my phases again. I'm trying to. I just wanted to make sure we're gonna get a donation. If there's not anything, wrong with the property as far as,
Mhm.
anything that we, bring it
You're
to, we need it.
Yeah.
Bring us some more.
Sure.
We had discussed that before because we've run into issues before. The oil is raised about not cutting timber, lots of restrictions on property. And that's why we.
Okay,
all these
yeah.
things in
I'm
process,
sorry, gotcha.
things we may not.
So, committee
be agreeable
concur,
to.
Yes, sir.
concur, everybody, do I see
Yep.
nods from committee? Okay, we're good. Move on.
All right, we're looking at a potential boating access area here in Pamlico County. It's a 7.7 acre tract. There is an existing boat ramp, 1-lane boat ramp, bulkhead that's in good shape, and a upland area for parking establishment on the site. And you'll see that a little bit better in the detail map here in a second. It's important for fishing access to Oyster Creek, which ultimately opens to the Pamlico River. It's also an important launch site for waterfowl hunters hunting our WRC Pamlico Point impoundment. This would be the nearest launch to that. Currently, they travel from Smith Creek, which is a pretty good haul, and also involves some traversing the Pamlico River on a windy day. Not a very safe trip. High priority boat and access area for staff. It scored a 2.156. It appraised at $730,000, and we plan or propose to fund it with a coastal recreational fishing license grant that's administered by the Division of Marine Fisheries. We refer to it as CREFL, if you ever hear that acronym thrown around. We received a CREFL grant for $365,000. We plan to make the other 50% up with state funds for a total of $730,000. And the estimated stewardship is $7,000 to establish parking and repair the existing pier, minor repairs. Staff recommend phase 2 approval of the lowland marina tract.
So why is there no revenue estimates? There's no it's just a free ramp, as lots of ours are, probably most of them, but.
Yeah, no cost
The
to-
guy at the end of the road charges there, correct?
Correct.
So we're gonna be getting a
We're
lot
gonna
of
be taking
his
his
stuff.
business.
Yeah.
Taking his
We'll
business.
be taking it.
And I'll mention too, that was the whole reason staff looked into this ramp. The ramp near the point. You see the marina at the point. If you come back to that next slough, that's the ramp the public have been able to access. The previous owner allowed access via the honor system. The new owner kept that going, realized the honor system was being abused, and shut the ramp down during one of our hunting seasons. This is also, that privately owned ramp is a ramp that staff use for management at Pamlico Point. So we're at risk of losing an access point near Pamlico Point. And we do quite a bit of management out there. So this will be an important spot.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't remember that we charge on any of our ramps, but I can't remember.
No,
that.
but that's under the guys that study.
It's what?
Right now.
Pardon?
That's under, we got an ad hoc committee working on looking at.
Yeah.
We don't charge anyway.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that's
I
under.
get all that.
consideration.
We got free game lands and all that. Anyway, I was just wondering if we charge anywhere else. I didn't remember them being it anyway. But anyway, committee, concur. The Cruffle grant big. We're all about access and trying to give people an opportunity to get out in the water and game lands, et cetera. So, we concur.
Yes.
Okay, okay, we all concur. Next.
That was our final phase 2. So we
Do
can
we want
break
to take
here.
them now as a group?
Mr. Chairman, you can take a motion, but these are going to be items on tomorrow's business meeting.
They're gonna
so you're
vote on
not-
them
you
all.
don't
Do it
have
then.
to, But we
Okay,
can.
let's just do it then.
All right, we have 5 other property matters to look at today. And that will conclude our land business. Our first is the Burning Town easement request. This is on the Needmore Game Land in Macon County. This is a request from Duke Energy to relocate the overhead power. You can see the proposed easement path in blue with a red center line. It would be a total of 40-foot width, 20-foot buffer on either side of that center line. The right of way would provide Duke the ability to install, maintain, and access that overhead power line. And the easement value here will be determined by the state property office. Any questions?
The same ones we asked the other day. I mean, why do they have to go so deep into our property? Why can't they put it right on the road? I guess they've got some logical deal, and maybe it'd be good for shooting doves. I don't know. But, it just looks kind of strange when the road runs there and this thing's going all over the place.
Because it's in the mountains and terrain
Let's
impacts
don't
where they
take any
can run
time,
it.
but I'm throwing a question now. So. Okay, do we concur? Everybody good? Good. Okay, move on. Roanoke Marsh.
Our
The
next,
second one, I mean, Dominion East.
our next request is the Roanoke
Oh, it is
Marsh
Roanoke,
easement
excuse me.
request. It's exhibit E2 for tomorrow. The request is for an ingress, egress, and utilities easement going from the state maintained road that you see at that cul-de-sac across game land to this Collins tract outlined in blue. Easement is 20-foot wide. The right of way will provide this person deeded access to their tract, which they currently do not have. And this easement value will be determined by a state property office.
I'll add that, I asked the question, does it take into consideration the increase in value on the Collins tract? And our answer was, yes, it does. So.
That will be the
That's
valuation
important.
method that the state property office uses. They'll evaluate the
That's a
tract
big
without
deal.
access.
Yeah, if it was my land, I'd be real happy.
The difference in value will be what the Collins are charged for this easement.
All right, any other questions there, committee? Other commissioners, any questions? Concur? Boom, boom.
Yep.
All right,
Our third request is a request from Dominion Energy to install a underground power to our Lantern Acres impoundment. This will require a utility easement. This is at staff's request. We are working on a conversion project at the impoundment to switch over from a diesel pump to a electric pump. Several benefits to that, but high priority project for us. The easement is approximately 1 mile in length. It's 20 foot wide. Again, it'll be underground power. This easement, we're proposing to grant this easement at no cost to Dominion Energy, as WRC did request this installation. And staff would like to move this one forward for your consideration.
So since we met, I had a question for you. So are we gonna have to pay for power to be run for that mile?
Yes, sir.
And do you know what that's gonna cost?
Dominion provided a rough estimate of 85,000.
You know, for $20,000, I can put a diesel tank out there and have somebody come once a month. I don't know what it is, but I think the answer to this is yes, move forward, but sometimes there's, I just don't know what it is per KW and how much that motor burns. But and it's a public utility, and diesel fuel is free enterprise system, you might say.
Is your request single phase or triple phase?
Not sure off the bat.
But we're not gonna change the pump, we're just converting it. I mean, it's diesel, it's run power to the pump.
I'll mention to you,
I want you to be mindful that your local fuel dealer, like we are, we run into this and we want to keep the business. But I don't know what the numbers really, how they work out, but that's a lot of money to run power out of.
Commissioner Craig, or Vice Chairman Craig, excuse me, in our itemized list, we have a line for electrician and phase converter, but I don't have which phase the pump will be.
Phase converter, then you're running single phase and convert it probably, which is not as efficient for your pump. That number would have been reasonable for three phases. Three phase expensive. Observation.
So, I mean, I don't want to hold up staff on this particular project and getting this thing moving forward, but we're going to probably approve it, but you ought to have your staff go back and look at the economics involved at the 350 diesel, 2,000 gallon tank. They'll put it out there for free. They'll deliver it for free. Only thing you got to convert is the cost of diesel, which is basically about $4.
And I know we've done some feasibility analysis on this. We are not provided delivery of diesel by the company. Staff are required to go out with some of our fuel tanks. They're on the trucks, and we refill the diesel tank to keep the pump running when we're filling the impoundment, which results in quite a bit of overtime and some weekend visits to the site. Also, there's safety and environmental benefits to the electrical option. So we've done a pretty good way in tipping of the scales to take the electrical route.
Okay, we'll take that another time, but anyway, there's an argument against that. Okay, all right. Staff, or excuse me, committee, concur? Concur? Okay, all right.
Our next request is the Star TMC request in Bladen County. This is at Stokes Mill Pond Game Land. This is a request for utility easement for Star TMC to install fiber broadband. The easement will have a 20-foot width. It's approximately 4,300 yards in total length. And the easement value that Star TMC will be charged for is the 950-yard segment that you'll see. Probably hard to tell from back there, but it's the segment on the northeast end of the property here. The southernmost run, that's I think 3,300 yards. That's running fiber to our depot and to our cabin that's on site that's used as office space. SPO will determine the valuation for the 950-yard segment.
Anybody have any thoughts or questions on this? I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but that's certainly a long way. And I guess it'll be appraised. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. SPO will, they have an internal valuation method for these utility easement requests, but it will use comparable values in the area.
Okay, committee concur?
Yep.
Over, good. Okay,
Our final easement request is Exhibit E5 that you'll see tomorrow. This is a request for ingress and egress from the King private property and the Parton private property that are outlined in pink to the Little Tennessee River. I'll start by noting these easement requests are not to provide access from the state maintained road to private property. Both the King and Parton families have deeded access from the state road to their property. This would be granting them the ability to take ATV or vehicle through Game Land Road to the Little Tennessee River, which we prohibit on all of our other game lands, vehicular use and ATV use. The total easement length, blue and yellow line combined, is 3,117 feet. I'll start by pointing out some of the King and Parton family submitted the request in one joint effort, represented by Mr. King. And their claim is that they've had historical use of these dirt roads for approximately 100 years. I'll provide the map, the Tennessee Valley Authority map from 1936 here in a second that does show the line in yellow as a dirt path back in 1936. And with that historical use, we have taken the matter to our Attorney General's office, and they provided a review. And the summary from that is there is potential that they have a case for prescriptive easement or easement by implication based on that historical use. But it is important to point out there is no recorded right of way in existing deed or in any historical deed. I'll mention the other point, the other side of the coin to that. There is also the potential that WRC has a case that we have extinguished that easement by prescription through time. That extinguishment would be through showing sufficient dominion of the land that we received from Duke Energy. And I'll go into some of our management activities through the years. But first, we'll start with a few photos of damage that we've incurred along these roads. You can see the rutting here. Pretty blatant disregard for state-owned land. There was a private dock that was installed extending off of Needmore Game Land out into the Little Tennessee River that we came in and asked them to remove. I'll back up a second. With this damage, we did come in and we placed some concrete barriers to prevent anyone from traveling down here while this area was repaired. Our final action within the last year, we have placed signage along these private dirt roads to that state vehicular use and ATV use is prohibited on game land. We have that signage in other areas, but that rule is nothing new. The public are not allowed to travel all outside of our graveled roads open to access. And this is the map I mentioned it a little bit earlier. This is the Tennessee Valley Authority map from 1936. The area circled in blue is where the King and Parton properties exist. The dotted line only is portraying the dirt road, and it's only portraying the dirt road that extends to the King parcel. It doesn't show a dotted line or a dirt road extending to the Parton parcel back in 1936. I covered most of the high points on this request. If there are any questions, specific questions, we can delve into that, but I think I'll leave it at that for y'all's discussion.
and I think their argument is they've been using it for a long time. And our argument is that that's too bad. We don't want you there anymore. And, I think that, as we decided to do is deny this request. And if they want to take it to court, then, so be it. Does anybody want to discuss that?
They have any capability to do road maintenance?
Actually,
Excuse me, we have a question here, Commissioner Davis first.
Do they have any capability to do road maintenance? Partner Kings End.
I think there was verbal permission granted from the property dates back to Nantahala Power Company ownership, then transferred to Crescent Resources, which then became Duke Energy. And it was transferred from Duke Energy to us. I think these past owners had, at least back to Nantahala, they had granted verbal permission for these folks to use this road. So that's a bit of the history. We didn't carry forward that same view, and we didn't grant that same permission.
And it looks like the Partons, they have good access. Kings
Yes, sir.
doesn't see any access at all. Is that a true statement?
They both have good access, immediate access to their property from State Road. From their property to the river, neither one of them have deeded access.
That's what they want.
There are existing dirt paths.
This isn't really, they just want to get to the river. This
Right.
isn't to get to their property.
This is for recreation,
Correct,
private
correct.
recreation.
So Commissioner Hazel, did you have another question?
So, like I mentioned, through the years, we had verbally told them not to use the road. The concrete barriers were placed back when we incurred that damage. What pushed it to the head was the recent signage. And they noticed the signage, they adhered to the signage once it was up. And that's what led them to seek after this deeded right of way.
Let me say this, history is, make sure we're right. It does not deny them access to their property. It denies them access to a recreational river that they have to come through state property to get to.
Correct.
Well, most of the time, you can't landlock a man from his property, but I can't say I'm gonna give you access to a recreational piece of property.
And I'll mention too, they have every ability and right currently to walk from their property to the river.
Oh, okay, so
Fish
they-
from- It's just for
Yes.
vehicular use.
That's all we're doing.
Ben, who's tore this road up so bad? Them?
They did.
And I asked the same thing because I wanted to be sure that that's speculation that it could be them, but that area, that road is only accessed via the King property and the Parton property. There's no other game land road for the public to use to access it. Did another member of the public aside from the Kings and Partons go through their property illegally and use the road? There's that potential, but they're the only 2 points of ingress and egress to those dirt paths. And just one final note, I think I skipped this, y'all have noted it, but there is potential for future litigation if we decline it. AG's office has pointed that out, but ultimately their facts, our activities through the years would have to be weighed in court. That happens. It's happened before in the past for us.
And what kind of barriers would you put there to keep them from going on that? Because if they've been using it all these many years, I can see the attitude, hey, I've been using it since my great granddaddy did it and I'm going to do it too. You mentioned these concrete barriers. Are they pretty firm and can they be pushed out of the way? What happens there?
So our action going forward, if we wanted to surely cut off access, we could place a gate where the King property enters the property and where the Parton property enters the property. But being that public, they don't have access to that point. Typically, we will place a gate if the public have access to that central point, and they don't. It's just 2 families. So we haven't went as far as to place a gate. The concrete barriers just cut off access. We basically placed it so that no one could continue to enter that mud ball.
Leave the mud ball.
Leave them alone.
Yes.
Just to be clear too, when we run across instances like this on our game land, we post and try to educate and do community outreaches and try to
let people know, but ultimately we'll barricade signage and force the people from trespassing.
But
One other,
Yeah, historically, we try to be friendly on easements and accesses. But in this case, staff has recommended that we cut it off for stated reasons, and I would suggest that the committee support staff and that we cut it off. Yes.
what access do we have for these tracks? It looks like these are big open fields adjacent to the river. Do we have any management activities to maintain that?
And that's an excellent point. I'm glad you brought it up. So our only way to access this tract is through the King and Park properties. They've refused us access across their properties to access our internal game land route. So
well, there you go.
There's your sign.
Why didn't you make, that's a material, why did you wait and swing that at the end?
Kind of a coup de
It's a
grace.
material consideration.
I'd like to hear that in the beginning.
If we'd done that, we'd be on time, Mr. Chairman.
Let's move on.
Getting there.
Yeah, 10:15
Committee.
time.
Concur.
Yes.
Yeah. With staff.
Okay, with staff, exactly. So, let's see, what was that? That's the last one, isn't
It will be in the business meeting.
it? We've decided to group them all. King Parton, okay, what do we got? That's it?
that's our final easement request for a total of 5 you viewed today.
Okay, I have some other little thoughts, but let's leave them alone.
I mean, overdue, 6 minutes
Yeah.
overdue.
Yeah, we're good. We covered it all in hour 15. That's pretty good. So, with that, we're gonna close Land Acquisition Committee.
To prolong that, but what did we decide on that last one?
Not do.
Agree with
Not
staff
do
Concur with staff
and
and
deny the request.
not allow these.
Are they gonna let us go through there to get married?
Yeah.
We've already denied our right to go through that problem.
At this time, we have.
Probably because we pissed them off.
No,
Hey,
that's not coming.
gentlemen, we got a meeting going on down here. Go ahead, Judge. You're welcome, my friend.
Margot, roll call, please.
Gonna do a roll call for our Boating Safety Committee members, Committee Chair J.C. Cole.
Present.
Committee Vice Chair, Ray Clifton.
Here.
Committee Member John Coley. Committee Member Hayden Rogers. Committee Member Tom Hayslip.
Here.
And Committee Member Mike Alford.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. At this time, we'd like to turn the meeting over to Ms. Pace.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Today for your consideration, we have several no-wake zone requests. Most of them, except for the last one, are going to be requests for final adoption tomorrow. But the first is Exhibit H, and in H1, this rule for Brunswick County at Lockwood Folly River was open to public comment. And while there were no comments at the public hearing on November 9th, we did receive 13 comments from the public, all in favor of this. Then moving on to H2, which is actually final adoption for the proposed amendments to Brunswick County. The notice of text for adoption to 15A NCAC 10F.0305 to establish a no-wake zone on a portion of Lockwood Folly River around Ruark's Landing subdivision, and several technical corrections to correct the name of the Morningstar Marinas in Southport adjacent to the ICW, to find the location of the Sunset Bridge and boating access area on the ICW, to find the location of the Ocean Isle Beach Odell Williamson Bridge and BAA on the ICW, codify the no-wake zone within 250 feet west and 100 feet east of the Holden Beach Bridge and boating access area on the ICW, within 50 yards of the Sunset Harbor BAA, adjacent to the ICW in Bolivia, within 20 yards of the shoreline and 50 yards east and 50 yards west of the Brick Landing boating access area on the ICW in Shalot, within 50 yards of Rice's Creek BAA in Winnebago, within 50 yards of the Pireway BAA on Waccamaw River in Ash, and within 50 yards of the Dutchman Creek Boat Ramp in Southport, was published in the NC Register with an open comment period and public hearing per the Administrative Procedure Act. And I will note that the reason for all of these additions here was in response to commission request a few years ago to please add into the NCAC all of these boating access areas that are already allowed under an engineering rule. But for the sake of public information and enforcement, putting them into the NCAC under the 10F rules will help educate the public and also make them more available for people to look at and know that that's what the law is there. So tomorrow, staff will seek your adoption of these proposed rule amendments with some changes to text since the rule was published, subject to final review by the North Carolina Rules Review Commission, and the earliest effective date would be February 1, 2024. Yes, sir.
You mentioned Brick Landing, 20 yards from shore.
And the reason for that is the Corps of Engineers will not consent to allow us to move it 50 yards out because it's within their navigation channel. So
Dock there goes out 20 yards.
exactly. I know our hands are sort of tied, but what we've done, I've talked to Land and Water Access, and they're going to put signage on the end of the dock that says it's 20 yards out, but then set buoys 50 yards east and 50 yards west. So at least people will know to start slowing down there. And I think it'll make a difference. If it doesn't make a difference, let me know and I'll go beg the Corps of Engineers again.
What other question? You can't regulate the waterway, right?
I'm going to defer to enforcement on that. And I say that because the Corps will not concur with regulating only one class of vessel, which is, and in other words, they're not going to allow us to slow down their commercial vessel. However, we can't just say, okay, we're going to regulate motorboats, but we're not going to regulate barges under our authority. So it's enforcement. I mean,
There is some federal law that one of our legislatures went in down at Southport, had a federal law to allow some rules to be made to regulate recreational vessels, but not commercial vessels, because the intercoastal waterway was designed for intercoastal transport for commercial. So, but as far as we're concerned, we don't do that. If we're doing no wake zones on the intercoastal waterway, they won't concur and let us do it. But and I forget who the legislator was that did that about 3 years.
wasn't it Rouser?
Yeah, David Rouser did that because there was some, it is for specific things like if there's fuel pumps and marinas on the waterway, the federal law will allow them to create a no wake zone for commercial vessels or for recreational vessels only, but commercial vessels can have at it. It created a conflict and it's under federal law too, which we could enforce. So that's kind of where it's at right now. It's kind of political.
When they talk about under the bridges, that's the waterway.
They will concur with that. Now, the Corps of Engineers will concur because they see the same navigational hazards at bridges, but they keep it tight. I mean, it's very clear. It's 50 yards either side and that's it, but they will do that.
Mhm. And that's why I wrote into the rule exactly what the specifications are in different areas, because it's not always 50 yards. You look at Holden Beach, and for a while they said, we're not going to concur with any of it. But then they said, well, you've got a boating access area there and the other hazards. And so it's like, 100 yards one way and 50 yards another way. So it's confusing, but we are the only state along the Eastern Seaboard who uses this federal law. And when I say we don't use the federal law, but the counties or municipalities go to the feds and get it done in their situations. And I understand that Brunswick County is considering a few others, but again, we won't have anything to do with that rulemaking. That will be through the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the county. It's confusing, but thank you for asking. All right, moving on to Exhibit I. This is Forsyth, Rockingham, and Stokes County on Belews Lake. And there was a public hearing held on November 9th. There were no attendees and there were no comments received during the open comment period. Then moving on to I2, The notice of text for adoption of an amendment to 15A NCAC 10F.0316 on Ballew's Lake in Rockingham County to establish a no-wake zone at the Carolina Marina within 50 yards of the fuel dock, then northwest and east to the cove north of the marina, where the boat ramp, dry stacks, and outdoor storage facilities are located, was published in the North Carolina Register with open comment period and a public hearing. Staff tomorrow will seek your adoption of the proposed rule amendment with some text changes highlighted. We rewrote the text a little bit because you can see this is confusing. It goes out from the shore and then it dog legs up to the west, and then it dog legs east to the mouth of that cove. So I think we did some changes to the text that make it more understandable, but we're going to ask your adoption of this rule tomorrow, and the earliest effective date will be February 1, 2024. Okay, moving on to Exhibit J. First, we did advertise and hold a virtual public hearing for Caldwell County on November 9th, and there were no attendees and there have been no comments received. This is the notice of text for adoption to amendments to 15A NCAC 10F.0338 Caldwell County to establish a no-wake zone on Lake Roadhis within 50 yards of the marina facilities at Castle Bridge Marina and within 50 yards of the Castle Bridge boating access area and Conley Creek boating access area. Also on Lake Hickory within 30 yards of the docks at the Lake Hickory Marina and boat rentals in Hickory, within 50 yards of the Gunpowder boating access area in Granite Falls, and within 50 yards of the Love Lady boating access area in Granite Falls, was published in the North Carolina Register with the open comment period and public hearing. And tomorrow, staff will seek your adoption of these proposed rule amendments, subject to final review by the Rules Review Commission, and the earliest effective date of this rule will also be February 1, 2024. Okay, moving on to Exhibit K. This too was advertised and a public hearing was held, virtual public hearing was held on November 9th, and there were no public comments received at the hearing nor during the open comment period. Moving to Exhibit K2, which is the request for final adoption of this rule. The notice of text for adoption of 15A NCAC 10F.0380 Town of Roadhills to establish a no-wake zone shore to shore on Lake Hickory in the town of Roadhills in Burke and Caldwell counties, beginning west of the line, 165 yards east of the State Route 1611 bridge, then westward, ending at the Roadhills Dam, was published in the North Carolina Register with the open comment period and public hearing. Tomorrow, staff will seek your adoption of this rule, subject to final review by the North Carolina Rules Review Commission. Earliest effective date of this one would be February 1, 2024 too. Okay. Moving on to Exhibit L. This is a rule amendment or series of rule amendments for Bladen County, 15A NCAC 10F.0304. The Bladen County rule has not been touched in many, many years. And until now, the only area even mentioned in the Bladen County rule was White Lake, and we'll get to that in a minute. But first, the request we received was from the North Carolina Department of Transportation to work with them to establish a no-wake zone on the Cape Fear River in a little town called Council, shore to shore, to mitigate boater safety hazards within 50 yards east and 50 yards west of the Elwell Ferry Bridge and Elwell's Ferry boating access area. And I don't know how many of you have been down there, but this is a really old-fashioned ferry system where the ferry is pulled across that narrow part of the Cape Fear with a cable, which has caused multiple problems because the cable is not visible, and at some points it hangs into the water and vessels have actually run into it. So agency enforcement did investigate the area and returned the assessment matrix, which you can see in Exhibit A, along with this map. And the hazards, of course, to boater safety and operation were noted. Ferry cable stretches 100 yards shore to shore And as I said, the ferry cable is not visible in the river and vessels have hit this ferry cable. So as a part of this request for an amendment to the rule, we delved into White Lake. At White Lake, this is a very old rule. It's been in there since 1976. And over the years that I've been doing this job, I have read it and enforcement has read it over and over, and it was very hard to understand what it referred to. So staff consulted with Lane Garner, who is the Singletary Lake State Park Superintendent, who has supervision over White Lake, and asked if he could help us clarify and correct the amendment for White Lake. He told me that North Carolina State Parks plans to remove wooden poles that have been sticking up out of that lake in a circle within 500 feet from the shoreline. And they call that a restricted area from 500 feet out over to the shoreline. In the restricted area, vessel operation shall be at no wake speed. Skiing is prohibited in the restricted area. A person who is engaged in diving in White Lake shall display a diver's flag, and no vessel shall approach within 50 feet of a diver's flag as described in General Statute 75A-13.1. The prohibition against swimming that was in this rule for a long time has been removed, as we were told that swimming was always intended to be allowed throughout White Lake. So we got that straight. At the same time as we're doing this, we are also identifying 3 agency-owned or operated boating access areas on the Cape Fear River to be codified in the NCAC. One at the Elwell's Ferry Boating Access Area, also within 50 yards of the Tar Heel Boating Access Area in Tar Heel and Torrey Hole Boating Access Area in Elizabethtown, and one on the Black River in Kelly within 50 yards of the Hunts Bluff Boating Access Area. So tomorrow we're going to ask that you will approve publishing notice of text in the North Carolina Register for amendments to 15A NCAC 10F.0304 with an open comment period of at least 60 days and 1 public hearing. Upon the close, we will then ask you to consider permanent adoption of these amendments for Bladen County at White Lake, Cape Fear River, and Black River. Any questions on that?
Any questions?
All right.
Additional topics?
No, sir, but thank you all so much.
That concludes our report.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Do they still use that there? Okay, Kelly, you can start.
We're back on schedule.
Yes.
Okay.
That's the best.
I'll order the meeting of the Habitat Non-Game and Endangered Species Committee. Mark, would you call the roll, please?
I was gonna do the roll call for our Habitat Non-Game Endangered Species Committee, Committee Chair Kelly Davis.
Here.
Committee Vice Chair Landon Zimmer.
Here.
Committee Member Tommy Fumble. Committee Member Brad Standback.
Here.
Committee Member Hayden Rogers. Committee Member John Alexander.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, we've got a full agenda. Let's get right to it.
Thank you. We can start the program with a presentation. So we have our bat biologist here from Western North Carolina, Catherine Etchison. She's been with us for almost 9 years, and she's going to give us a nice presentation on the Virginia big-eared bat. And I'll turn it over to Catherine.
So much. Hey, everybody. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you so much for having me here today. I'm excited to talk to you all about the Virginia big-eared bat and just the conservation and monitoring that's been going on with this bat in North Carolina. So we will jump right in. First off, I just want to start with some biological information about this species. Kind of the first thing to know is they're a medium-sized bat, which doesn't tell you a whole lot if you're not looking at bats every day like I am. But basically, it's just not the smallest bat we have in the state and not the biggest bat we have in the state, somewhere in between. But what gives you sort of a more firm estimate of its size is it's about 4 inches from the tip of its head to the tip of its tail. But something that really stands out about their appearance is their ears are 1 inch long. So if you think about a bat that's like 4 inches long and then it has an extra inch long ear, that's a really notable thing on this bat's body and makes it really readily recognizable. And I think also very cute. And this species is a subspecies of a bat that's out west called the Townsend's big-eared bat. But the ranges of the Townsend's big-eared bat and the Virginia big-eared bat are nowhere close to each other. This Virginia big-eared bat is just an eastern US subspecies. So this species is colonial. They form colonies. They're very gregarious, very social. They roost together in a group, and they're cave dependent. So they're roosting in caves year round, which not all of our bats do, but this one does. They're also non-migratory. So they're going to be residents in the places that they exist. They don't migrate away for any season. In the wintertime, the entire range of this species breaks up into really big groups and hibernates together in just 10 what we call primary caves across its range. And we have one of those caves in North Carolina, which I'll talk about here in just a couple minutes. In the spring and in the summertime, this species uses caves as maternity sites as well, but they tend to be different caves than the bat uses in the wintertime, mainly because they need certain features for the growth of their young. So they need basically domed ceilings that trap the heat, and that really speeds development of those pups. And so they look for really kind of key caves that they use as their maternity sites. And then they'll use a network of what we call secondary roosts as well, which are smaller roosts. They don't use them for as long duration, and they sort of switch between that primary maternity cave and then those secondary roosts. Those secondary roosts are usually like small caves, rock shelters, even barns and buildings at times. The females give birth to just one pup per year, and that tends to be late May, early June kind of time frame. And this species primarily eats moths, and they're very well adapted for that. That's kind of why they have those big ears. It helps them to see those moths and sneak up on them without using echolocation. And they forage along cliff lines within forests. They're very agile flyers. They can avoid branches and trees, and also in open habitats, so like wide open fields or forest openings as well. The listing status for this bat is both state and federally endangered, and they've been listed as federally endangered since 1979. And that's primarily because of population declines associated with human disturbance and vandalism at caves, and also habitat loss. And the key thing here is this species is majorly sensitive to human disturbance in caves. They really are intolerant of people, even us, like, just researchers going in to study them. They don't want any part of that. And they will just abandon a cave outright if there's too much human disturbance. And the bad thing about that is they're so selective about certain microclimate characteristics and other characteristics that they need in their caves, that there might not be other caves out there to support these bats when they abandon a site. So that was really the main driver there for the population declines that led them to become listed. The distribution of this species, I mentioned, they're in the eastern US, but where specifically are they? I've listed the states here, from the states with the highest populations of this species to the lowest. So West Virginia really has the bulk of this species in their state. And then next up is Kentucky, then Virginia, then us here in North Carolina, and then Tennessee. As far as we can tell, they just get like a little bleed over of our North Carolina bats that sometimes venture into Tennessee. So this species was first found in our state in 1981, and they were actually found inside that primary hibernaculum that I mentioned earlier, that cave that they use in the wintertime, which is in Avery County. The good news there, when they were found, that cave was already on protected property. So nobody had to rush out and figure out how to protect this cave that has this endangered species in it. It was already protected. But the issue there was it needed to be gated to prevent people from just exploring the cave, going and seeing the bats, anything like that. So in 1986, a bat-friendly gate was installed on that cave. The bats can freely come and go, but people cannot unless you have a key to the gate. The biggest question for many years was, where do these bats go in the wintertime? Because they were not in that Avery County cave that they use in the winter in the summertime. They left. And so that was kind of a big deal, because if you've got this endangered bat, they're really susceptible to human disturbance. They use caves, like people love caves. And so we really needed to know where these bats were so we could make sure that we're protecting them. Enter a study that happened in 2013 and 2014. This was done by Indiana State University. It was funded by the North Carolina Department of Transportation. And so basically what this master's student and his team did is they put radio transmitters on the bats or the back of these bats within the primary hibernaculum right at the tail of winter, when these bats were about to leave for the summer. And then they were able to actually track the bats once they left, and that led them to the maternity cave. That sounds way more simple than it is in real life. This was attempted before by the Wildlife Commission and was not successful, because tracking bats is like notoriously very hard. And then tracking them in this crazy mountainous, steep, rocks everywhere kind of landscape is just almost impossible. So this was a huge feat that they were able to do this. And that maternity cave ended up being in Watauga County. It's 9 miles away from the primary hibernaculum. And the scary thing is, at the time it was on private land, and the landowner did have intention of developing that property. And so luckily a group came together, the Wildlife Commission included, to protect that land in 2017 as a state parks natural area. The ISU study, they also found 32 secondary roosts, those kind of smaller roosts. That was, used by anywhere from 1 to 10 bats. So pretty small numbers of bats use those secondary roosts. And they also identified key foraging areas, places where a lot of these radio transmitter bats were going to forage each night. That had never been done in our state before. Oh, I should also point out, the master's student who did this work, he's there in that picture. His name's Joey Weber. He actually works for the Wildlife Commission, and he is my right-hand person and a true expert and guru on this species and on radio telemetry. So we're very lucky to have Joey. Fast forward now to our current monitoring and what we're doing. So every other winter, we go into that Avery County hibernaculum, that cave that supports these bats in the wintertime. We count all the bats that are there. That's just a really good way that we're able to get population trends over time. We also are able to check on that gate, because we know at some point that gate's going to need to be replaced. But so far, so good. It's looking great so far. And then in the summertime, we go to that maternity cave. Twice in the summer usually, and we sit out at sunset as the bats are about to come out. We have night vision goggles, and we just simply count the bats as they come out of the cave. That's called an emergence count. And that is a really great non-invasive way that we're able to figure out how many bats are using this cave in the summer. We don't have any lights on or anything like that, so it's not very disruptive to them. We also do some camera trap monitoring at the maternity cave, and that's simply having a trail cam on a tree that looks right at the maternity cave entrance. So we're able to see if any people show up at the cave, how many animals are outside or going into the cave or potentially preying on bats. The good news is we've never seen people on that camera except for us. So that's exactly what we want to know and see. And then we also do winter counts at smaller hibernacula every 4 years. These are caves that support really small numbers of these bats. I'm talking like 1 to 2 bats. So that's why we don't do them super frequently, but we just want to keep our eyes on them in case something would change with those numbers of bats over time. Now let's get into some data. So this is our winter trends at that primary hibernaculum. And it only had 34 Virginia big-eared bats when it was first discovered, but we've seen a pretty good increase in counts over the years, but a ton of variability, as you can see here. The highest count on record actually happened this year, and it was 462 Virginia big-eared bats. So we were really pumped about that. I wish I had a good explanation for the variability that we see here, and I really don't. The only kind of partial explanation I have is there might be another hibernaculum out there that we don't know about. So when Joey was doing his master's project, he radio tracked 8 bats from the primary hibernaculum up higher on the mountain. He was getting the signals of the bats transmitters from a specific location on the mountainside, but it was so hard to access, just like very steep. You would need to like rappel down to the spot on the mountainside, really high winds. It's very high elevation, icy, all this stuff. So they weren't able to figure it out. And we haven't been able to, well, we haven't tried to figure it out yet, I should say. It's kind of lower on the list of priorities because this area is protected. And if it's that hard to access, like nobody's going in there and disturbing those bats. So it's a question we would like to answer at some point. We just haven't gotten there just yet. Now looking at those summer trends, we've known about this maternity cave for 10 years. And when it was found, there were 263 individuals in there. We've seen a slight increase over this last decade. The highest count we've had on record is 533, so that's pretty good. That was last year. This year was around 450, still pretty good. But something we're paying close attention to that might be hampering some of our increase in trends, we're not really sure, is that camera trap and what we're seeing on the camera trap. So this Indiana State University study, they had a camera there as well. And they documented raccoons 10 times more frequently in photos than any other animals at the site. And those raccoons were really most active at the times the bats are most active. So that was 9 p.m. to 4 a.m. And they were also most present during the months that bats are really keying in and using this site, which is April to September. So we still see this really high activity now with raccoons. We don't know for sure that they're preying on bats. We haven't seen like a photo of a raccoon with a bat in its mouth or something. But the context clues are kind of there to suggest that they might be preying on some of these individuals. That cave entrance is really low to the ground. And when bats first learn to fly, when they're juvenile, they're not great flyers. So these raccoons maybe could be taking some out of the air. It's something we're going to look more into in 2024, and so we can better understand this and manage this. Something else I just want to quickly point out is we got to be part of this interagency meeting this year on the Virginia big-eared bat. This was a meeting of the state and the Fish and Wildlife Service representatives that work with this species, and it was in Kentucky just last month. It was a great meeting because we kind of informally shared our updates from each state, how the bats are doing, what techniques we're doing, what's worked, what hasn't worked, to try to all just come to the table and talk about this bat and how to monitor them and get on more of a consistent page range-wide with monitoring this bat. We also got to go to some of their field sites and this really cool cave that has thousands of Virginia big-eared bats in the wintertime. So that was really cool just to see what that cave looked like. And this meeting was so valuable. We're going to do it again next year, and we are going to host this meeting next year in North Carolina. Something that we learned at this meeting were just the range-wide trends, state-by-state trends. We're always pretty focused on our own states, so that was pretty illuminating. And I'll share some of that with you today. So in West Virginia, this is where the bulk of that species occurs. They're seeing increasing counts, which is great. That's exactly what we want to hear. They have had 15,000 bats as their most recent high count. Then Kentucky and Virginia, it's a little more complicated there. They're seeing decreasing in their counts, but they might have caves that they don't know about that these bats use, and they suspect that that's likely the case. So it might not be that the population itself is decreasing. It might be that these bats are just switching roosts to caves that are unknown to the state biologists monitoring them. Kentucky has had 3,500 bats at their most recent high count, and Virginia's at 1,000. And to put that into perspective, we're between 500 and 600. And then Tennessee just has one secondary roost that they know of, one of those smaller roosts, and it was found as part of the ISU study. They tracked one of our North Carolina bats over into Tennessee, and it was using just a really small cave. And then Maryland had some acoustic detections of this species this year. They've never found a visible or visual confirmation of this species or a cave or anything like that. So that's something that they're going to be working on. And then I just want to finish up today by pointing one thing out. We got to participate in this documentary on the Virginia big-eared bat back in 2019. The Appalachian State University did. It's freely available on Vimeo. So if you're interested in this bat, I would encourage you to check it out. It's 12 minutes long, so it's like shorter than my talk is today. And you can just Google Saving the Virginia Big-eared Bats and Vimeo, and it should come right up. It tells the story of ISU finding that maternity cave, and then the group of entities, ourselves included, that helped get that cave protected as a state parks natural area. So check that out if you're interested, and I am so happy to take your questions if I have time. Thank you.
So you may have answered this and I missed it. What about rabies?
Yeah, so any bat can have rabies. It's not something that we see a prevalence of in this particular species. Like when we get the reports from the rabies lab, this species is never one that we get a report of, probably just because they're so rare. They're rarely coming into contact with people. Even the few secondary roosts that have been in barns and in houses, they're usually in houses that are under construction. They're not houses that are being occupied. And the barns are, you know, these outbuildings that people don't use very much. So this isn't a bat that's going to really get in your house and form a big colony like you hear of in an attic or something like that. This bat is way too scared of people to do that. Yeah.
So one more quick question. What about predators? You suspect a coon, but are there any other predators?
Yeah, so coyotes are another one that sorry, I'm not using the mic. Coyotes are another one we've seen in the photos. And there's actually been one photo of a coyote like sort of biting a bat out of the air or trying to. So that could be another issue as well. But raccoons are so much more readily seen in those photos than coyotes.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Yes.
Do they have problems with the white nose fungus, or is that not an issue?
Great question. I was really hoping someone would ask that because I love when people know about white nose. They don't. First, for whatever reason, we're not totally sure. They don't get the disease. They'll be in the same caves with other bat species that are affected by the disease, covered in the fungus. And these bats, the Virginia big-eared bats, don't get it. One of the leading thoughts there is they naturally wake up a lot during winter, just naturally from hibernation. And so they can clean themselves off if they get that fungus on them before it really invades the tissues and disrupts their physiological functions. So yeah, this is like one of the few species that's cave dwelling that doesn't get it. Thanks for your question. Yeah.
Seems like it's mostly intolerance. If it's not white nose, I don't see pictures of wind farms or light pollution there. And I'm not sure how you vandalize the cave, but I guess it's just people being in the caves. But are we, the North Carolina population of Virginia big-eared bats really kind of the fringe, kind of the southern extent of the range? So that's the case. What are our downlisting or delisting, benchmarks? What are we looking for?
Yeah, great question. Yep, we're at the southern end of the range. And so the latest Fish and Wildlife Service recovery plan, it's like a draft amendment. It's not finalized yet, but they have identified target numbers for each of the populations of Virginia big-eared bat. We're lumped in with Virginia. And so there are concrete numbers. I think it's 3,000 is the number to hit for our population combined with Virginia, which right now we're around 1,500. So we're about halfway there. And then there's a lot of other parameters built in there as well. It has to be a population that's stable or increasing for 16 years, which is like the lifespan of this animal. There have to be a minimum number of protected hibernation and maternity sites and protected foraging sites, which none of the states have taken that on just yet.
Are there plans to gate more of the maternity or the non-primary hibernaculum?
Yeah, so the secondary ones, great question. So those are like kind of low on our list. We haven't been able to spend enough time there because they're really small as far as like 1 to 10 bats use them versus hundreds of bats using the maternity site. So they're probably not quite as key for these bats. But it's something we could look into, especially over time. They might use these sites even more if there's less disturbance or if just microclimate conditions become more favorable in these sites. So we do go back to them to check on this. And at some point it might warrant gating at some of these sites if they become more important.
Catherine, I noticed the people at the cave site are all in white. Is that protective clothing or? tell me
Yeah,
why.
so these are Tyvek suits, and a lot of times this is what we wear when we go into caves and mines in the winter because of white nose syndrome, actually. So it's not really to protect us, it's more so that we don't transport the fungal spores that cause the disease, because we go to all the places the bats go, and so we don't want to be, bringing these spores from point A to point B. So we wear these fun get-ups.
And then when you come out, you just strip and throw them away. Is that it?
Exactly. Yeah. And we've moved a little bit from that. We don't wear those quite as often now. We a lot of times wear like coveralls, like mechanics kind of coveralls, so that we can decontaminate them with we boil them basically. So it's not as wasteful as using the Tyvek all the time.
Thank you.
Aren't most bats highly resistant to rabies and other viruses? They can tolerate a high viral load without really having health effects.
Bats are pretty amazing, and they can withstand a lot of different infections and not show symptoms. We probably heard a lot about that when the COVID-19 pandemic began. And rabies is one thing they're able to tolerate as well, but they can get it. It's a really low prevalence in our state. We see only about 3% of bats that are tested for the disease come up positive. And I say tested, they're usually only tested if it's like there's a human health issue. So they've been in a house where a person could have been exposed. We don't just go out and test these bats because it tends to be like a lethal test. But yeah, they can have diseases, illnesses, and things like that don't present, and they're able to withstand them because they have these amazing immune systems. It's really complicated, but you should look it up because it's interesting. It has to do with how they adapted to be able to fly and how that links into their immune system. It's pretty cool.
Great presentation. Thank you. You got us ready for.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, y'all, and thanks for all those questions. So what I'm gonna leads into really quickly is the conservation plan for the Virginia big-eared bat. And so you all got a copy of this to review, and we are putting these together for all the listed species. And we want to consider conservation, protection, and management measures, causes of decline, and measures to take to restore the species. So Catherine set me up really well for this. I'll just go through quickly. So the Virginia big-eared bat this plan has been completed internal review as well as review by the Non-Game Wildlife Advisory Committee. And so now we're asking for you all to give us any comments that you have on the plan. You can give me your questions today or after this meeting. Our next step will be to take this to public review, and just short synopsis right here. Catherine again went over this. So the range involves just these 3 counties in Western North Carolina. And the conservation status, as Catherine mentioned, is federally endangered and state endangered. And some of the threats summarized here. They have a low genetic variability, small population size, and minimal connectivity to other Virginia big-eared bat populations. It's a concern. Human disturbance is a big impact. Predation possibilities, primarily raccoons, and microclimate alteration, which can be a result of disturbance to the caves or any of that habitat. And then last, increased development. We all know certain areas in Western North Carolina are prime areas for development, so that's a concern. So these are the primary threats. But the conservation actions, our overall goal is to protect roosting, foraging, and commuting habitats to encourage population growth, leading to recovery. So we want to maintain existing and install new gates or fences at sites that are threatened by human disturbance. We want to secure long-term protection at newly discovered roost sites. We want to protect foraging habitat, and that might be done through land acquisition, private landowner participation. And this is a wildlife land or conservation land program that we have, and conservation easements and partnerships. We want to continue monitoring in our research efforts so we continue to understand the bat better and how we can implement these actions better. And last, we want to continue outreach and engagement efforts. So we have a lot of collaboration with agencies and other states, like Catherine was mentioning, also with universities for research projects. We have working groups. We work with non-governmental organizations, and Catherine does an amazing job of reaching out to the public. And again, I encourage y'all to watch that short video. It's really great. So at this point, do y'all have any questions on this conservation plan or next steps? Okay. So our ask would be to take this to the public for public comment, and we'll post it on our website for 30 days.
Video okay with that?
Okay, all right, thanks. And I just want to quickly say, one of the next conservation plans y'all are going to see is a conservation plan for sea turtles. And then we have several others that are underway, Eastern Black Rail, various salamanders dependent on crevice habitat, and the American alligator, and then some aquatic species, Appalachian elk toe, Cape Fear shiner, orange fin mad tom, and yellow lamp mussel. So those are all coming your way.
Okay, Madam Chair. We do need a motion for this. If you don't mind entertaining
To move
one.
it to the business meeting.
Just to approve the conservation plan
Okay,
to go to public comment.
So is there a second to approve the Virginia Bigger Bat Conservation Plan? Okay, any more discussion than we've already had?
Yeah, quick question. American alligator, there are a lot of those out there, but I guess it's federally listed, so that's why it's state listed as well.
Right, yeah, that's why it's listed.
I guess we'll learn more as we continue.
Right, yes, that's correct. We'll have that soon.
That's why.
On the Virginia Bigger Bat, right?
Pardon me?
Okay, I just wanted to be clear, our motion
Motion
is
for the
to
bigger bat?
accept the Virginia
Oh,
Bigger
sorry,
Bat
then,
Plan. No,
Bob.
that's fine. It was a good question.
Thank you.
Okay, any discussion on the Virginia Bigger Bat Plan? No, okay. All in favor of accepting that, moving it on, or however, to work? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Mhm.
Okay, motion carries.
Okay, thank you. And I'll turn it over to Rachel.
Thanks, Sarah. So I'm going to keep in with our kind of business section here. I have our next 3 agenda items. The first one for you all today is an amendment request to the reintroduction proposal of spotfin chub. This was a plan that focused on the Little Tennessee and French Broad River basins. It was approved in February of this year. And this is a map to kind of reframe what was in this plan. We identified the HUC 12s, and a HUC stands for the Hydrologic Unit Code, which is developed by USGS, and it's basically a way of describing watershed size. And 12 is the smallest of the HUC sizes for watersheds. So the red sections are where spotfin chub are known. Currently, the khaki tan color are future expansions. And then what's hard to see in this map were these blue. We had identified the South Toe River, the Swannanoa, the French Broad, and the Tuckasegee River as the priorities for reintroduction under our programmatic safe harbor agreement. Our staff have been working really hard to reach out to non-federal landowners and to enroll them into this programmatic agreement and to find those sweet spots where we have really good habitat and willing landowners. This led to a request in August to include an additional HUC 12 in the Swannanoa River Basin, which the Hingies approved. And then today we've identified a new area within the Little Tennessee called Snowbird Creek. So this is the HUC 12 is in this blue with the black outline. And this is the Snowbird Creek. It's a really great area. It has lots of suitable habitat. It's within its historical range. We have willing partners, and it also has a really great geographic boundary for a reintroduction under a safe harbor. And so today we're asking for your review and approval for inclusion of this Huck 12, the Snowbird Creek Huck 12 in this reintroduction plan as one of our priority areas. And this will need a motion.
We're going to vote to approve it, but it will be also voted on in the business meeting, was that right? No, no, just right here.
Committee.
Okay, this.
Yep,
okay.
this only has to be reviewed and approved by Hengies.
Okay, how about that?
Move we accept that.
A second.
Second, discussion? No, before we vote, I would just think it's great communication and also great application of the Safe Harbor Act when we, the second one we've picked up. Nice work. Okay, all in favor of accepting this, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And so.
Is it my understanding that North Carolina is one of the only 2 states in the country that has safe harbor agreements in place for aquatic species?
You are correct.
That'd be us in Kansas. Is that what I read? Is that right?
Us in Kansas. And when I first presented on this, I thought Kansas beat us to the punch. But it turns out we beat them. So we got it signed and you'll hear as my third agenda item, some of the updates. And we are the first state to move forward with reintroductions under an aquatic program.
I want to point that out because that's a significant achievement for this commission to do that and foresight in this to deal with some of these conservation species.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to highlighting some of the work. So thank you for that. You are correct. So if there's no other questions about Spotfin Chub, I'll move into our next agenda item. Okay, so we went from business to maybe some harder topics here, and then we're going to end on some highlights for my agenda items. So I wanted to give an opportunity for you all to get an update on the recent detections of aquatic nuisance species in North Carolina and some of the work that we're doing. So the first invader that we saw this year was zebra mussels. And I'm just going to do a brief recap. This is an invasive, non-native freshwater mussel. It's known from Eastern Europe, specifically the Black and the Caspian. It's a filter feeder, and it has 3 main life stages. 2 of those, the adult stage and the juvenile stage down here, are benthic, meaning that they attach and they live in the bottom of things, of rivers. But the planktonic stage up here is in the water column, and it's very, very small. And this is what has allowed the species to be an effective invader in in the United States. It first was introduced into the Great Lakes in the 1980s, and it has really spread since then. It can invade all kinds of habitats, river, lakes, and reservoirs. And as we all probably know, it's caused severe ecological and economic impacts. It can crash fisheries. It can change the food webs. It can biofoul, clog water intake structures, outcompete native species. And then also the shells are very sharp and become recreational hazards. Economic wise, it is estimated, and this is probably an underestimation, that it's over $1 billion a year spent in damages in the United States alone.
What kind of damage? What do they do?
So kind of what I was saying, they can clog, they biofoul, they clog water intake structures and pipes. This has impacts to municipal water supplies, power plants. They create recreational damage. They also have, they can produce side effects that can crash systems and also ecological harm.
Thank you.
Yep. So North Carolina was out in front of this. We had done some risk assessments, and for the most part, North Carolina was at a low risk of successful invasion of zebra mussels. We had a scare in the mothball incident where zebra mussels showed up in commercial shipments of mothballs that were distributed to pet stores. That was effectively handled. That was in 2020. But on September 14th, the WRC got a report, and so did Duke Energy, that there was a potential zebra mussel population in a quarry in Iredell County. This is a recreational dive quarry. This is a map of the quarry. They sink all kinds of structures for them to dive around, anything from planes to buses. We took this report very seriously. On September 21st, we worked with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They have a Southeast dive team in order to help us conduct surveys. This is a 13-acre quarry and it's over 100 feet deep. And so we needed folks that had good scuba skills and good ID skills to assist us. We surveyed this red area only, it's a large area, and we also took water samples so that we could do genetic testing in case the animals weren't detected visually. And unfortunately, zebra mussels were detected in this water body on this day. They were confirmed, their identity was confirmed as zebra mussels. At this point in time, the quarry, we worked with the association and it has closed and remains closed to its members and the public in order to contain this ecological threat and invader. The association actually owns several recreational dive quarries and members have access to all of those. They had 2 other quarries. So in October, the WRC and the Fish and Wildlife Service coordinated again to go and survey those other 2 quarries to see the extent of the introduction of this species in North Carolina. We took water samples for eDNA. And then because the quarry is close, very close to Lake Norman, we also coordinated with Duke Energy in order to survey Lake Norman to see the extent of the invasion. Also, water samples were taken. And so I'm happy to stand up here today and say that zebra mussels were not detected in any of the other quarries that we sampled. They were not detected in Lake Norman using both visual and genetic techniques. And so right now we're only dealing with a fully contained water body in Iredell County. And really hats off to the Fish and Wildlife Service here. I just want to take a minute because we worked with them and they had about a day's notice to come in and assist WRC with this. And they had folks driving up from Miami and Arkansas with their expertise in order for us to investigate these quarries. We also felt that the public outreach was really important on this. So we ran press releases. We also, because this is linked to recreational diving, we expanded our guidance for recreational divers. We updated disinfection protocols for folks. And then we also updated the website. And thank you to CMDE and Fairley's team for really helping us get this messaging out. So what does this mean for us? Where are we? The goal is eradication for the quarry. This is actually achievable because it's a contained water body. And we're currently working to develop a recommendation for an eradication plan and evaluate all of the treatment options that exist now for zebra mussels. Fortunately, this is not the first time zebra mussels have shown up, and there are really great protocols from other states that we can lean on to learn on how to make the best recommendation. The biggest thing here is to then identify and secure funding for any kind of treatment options, and then to continue to reach the public and expand our own capacities to monitor for future detections and be out in front of those. So I'm going to move into apple snails. The second invader this year was apple snails. This is a large freshwater snail, also non-native. It's from South America. They get their name because they get to be the size of an apple and they can get up to 6 inches long and wide, they're big and they look like an apple. They cause ecological damage by disrupting and consuming agricultural crops, specifically rice and other aquatic related crops. And then they can decimate aquatic vegetation that's necessary for habitat. These have a human health component. They are carriers of rat lungworm disease, which can cause a fatal form of meningitis. They can be carriers of trematodes and flukes. And in fact, their eggs can produce a neurotoxin. This is the current map of, there's 2 species of invasive apple snails. They seem to be moving into the US from the south and have been expanding northward. And they are most likely introduced through the pet trade. Apple snails are very popular in the aquarium trade. There's all kinds of different colors and they're bred and distributed. They also can be an invaluable food source for certain cultures. We're also fortunate in that the only introduction of this happened in 1992 and it did not actually take. We never saw it expand in the Upper Dan River Basin. Fast forward to September, because September was real fun. We had another report September 7th to our district's fisheries biologist by a member of the public on the Lumber River. They actually were familiar with apple snails and saw these hot pink egg masses that they lay above the water line. You can see right here, they actually crawl out of the water and lay these, and they're really easily to recognize. The egg clusters were collected and confirmed to be an apple snail in the genus Pomaceae by our colleagues at the Museum of Natural Sciences. So we knew that we had them and we had eggs in hand, so staff went back out on September 27th to look at the distribution of these across the watershed. And this is the I-95 crossing over the Lumber River, and the dots represent the relative size and detections of live individuals. And it seems that the largest population is in the Saddle Creek 5 Mile branch, and it has probably expanded into this portion of the Lumber River. This is a free flowing body of water. And so management is going to be different because it's in a public body of water, and it is also not like contained. The good news is that the snails burrow down in the winter and they're going dormant, which is giving us the opportunity to develop a management strategy for when they start to reemerge in the spring. And really to increase our public outreach, because one of the effective management strategies is crushing those eggs and pulling them off and drowning them in the water. And so some states have been effective by eliciting the help of the public in order to keep these like beat back. All of this really highlighted the need for us to be able to accept reports and catalog those from the public. Most of the reports actually came from the public, and we wanted to increase this capacity. So we worked with our Inland Fisheries Division staff, and also thank you to John Lovett and Lena Water Access, who helped us put together an ArcGIS survey tool. The goals of this were to increase our capabilities for early detection and WRC's rapid response and coordination, both internal and external to partners. And it gives us an opportunity to educate the public. So this is what it looks like. It references our North Carolina State Wildlife, North Carolina Aquatic Nuisance Species Management Plan. And it shows all of the species that WRC has regulation over. And then it asks it's on a website, and it asks people to submit their contact information, a photo, and a location. To date, the tool has received about 20 reports. This is since October, and actually one mollusk as of yesterday. And surprisingly, it didn't stay to reports just in North Carolina. We did get mostly mystery snails, which is another non-native snail, but we did get one report of an apple snail in the already occupied area. And again, I just want to acknowledge that aquatic nuisance species has required lots of coordination among many agencies and partners and across multiple divisions. And we really appreciate the work from all of these collaborators. And so that concludes my second agenda item, and I guess I'll answer any questions. Yes, sir.
Are the zebra mussels depth specific?
So in the preliminary surveys, it's a big quarry. There is a hypolimnion that was occurring where at lower temperatures, they were doing better. And so they started to detect them at about 20 feet where it was slightly cooler. We weren't able, because it's much more technical diving, to get down into the 100 feet sections, but it seemed to be in the 20 to 30 feet.
Is the eradication lethal to pretty much all aquatic organisms, or zebra mussel?
So it depends on what treatment is used. At this point, since it's a contained water body, chemical options are a good path forward, and we can use things like potassium chloride salts to copper, and it depends on the pH and the features of the quarry. There are some that can be applied at low doses that do not harm other species like fish and some native mollusks.
Is it safe to assume the quarry is permanently closed to diving?
Well, it's closed until we can hopefully achieve eradication. Yes, sir.
Do Does it help to look into where you think it came from, or did you just find it and eradicate it and don't worry about that? Because if it was there from just logically thinking it was there from a diver or something where you would assume it came from, it wouldn't have been a diver from, Great Lakes. It was probably someone in one of those other locations. So I know you tested negative there, couldn't find anything there, but will you guys continue to test those locations?
So it's hard to know for sure where they came from. I can say that there are other positive bodies of water in Tennessee that are recreational dive quarries that have zebra mussels. This was under active investigation with the WRC. And there was a second piece to your question. Will we keep looking for them? Thank you. Yes. So yes, we will continue now that we know that they're here. There are all kinds of different techniques we can use, plankton toes, eDNA, to sample water bodies that have a higher risk of successful invasion.
Landon, to answer your question a little bit more, there is an incentive to put these things there because it does increase water quality, clarity for when you're diving. There is an incentive to that. And so when Cam called me and Mark to let us know that day, the critical component of this, these zebra mussels, if they get to water intake structures, infrastructure, dams, that's why that's why there was such a very quick response here, and there was a pipe leading out of one of these that may have had an opportunity to get into Lake Norman, done everything, and our staff in just a short period of time did an immediate response to this. I can't say enough to get, like she said, divers up here on short notice. And with Duke and all the infrastructure there around Norman, it was a huge issue to get a handle on very quickly. And also further background, I think there were some discussions there was some reticence about allowing us to get into the quarries, and I think there had to be some discussions occurred there by our enforcement staff. So it was a lot more involved than what you heard today, but the result is what you see today. Is there anything inaccurate about that, Cam?
Okay, any other questions? Keep us rolling. Yes, sir.
So they're invasive but not necessarily toxic to shell eaters, raccoons and stuff.
They can actually create harm. They have the ability to sequester harmful compounds from blue-green algae, some neurotoxins. And so because they're filter feeders, if they're sequestering those harmful neurotoxins and other animals eat them or people come into contact with them, they can pose a health concern for wildlife and humans. Okay. All right, moving right along. So we'll end on the high note, which is a review of the work that we've been doing under a programmatic safe harbor. And this also involves a snail, but it's the good kind.
Did you bring this one today? Yeah, I got.
So,
This morning.
just in review, about this time last year, we signed the programmatic agreement. We went through an approval process change, and we actually brought forward those reintroduction requests to this committee. And I'm going to highlight the work that we've done on 2 of those species. So the first one is the Roanoke log perch. This is a federal and state endangered species, and the goal here was to restore the population to the Mayo River. It was going to be done under doing reintroductions. This is going to be conducted under the safe harbor portion, and you all approved this proposal in February. As part of this, you kind of green lighted us to go forth and do good work. And we had other pieces of these agreements that we needed to meet. We wanted to enroll one landowner and with a property owner management agreement and certificate of inclusion. We wanted to conduct public outreach, and we wanted to have concurrence with our other states. And we also wanted to have an approved reintroduction plan working with the service. So this was the area that we targeted. This is the blue is the upper Mayo River. The pink shows, the pinkish shows its occupied areas. And so the focus was to get this animal back here. We did conduct a public forum. We sent mailers to over 600 landowners in this watershed. We got really great feedback, and we were able to identify Piedmont Land Conservancy property, and they signed up with a POMA and a COI for us to be able to reintroduce this species on through their property. And so on October 10th, all of the partners, including Mayo River State Park, Piedmont Land Conservancy, Fish and Wildlife Service, they met at Piedmont Land Conservancy's land. Mayo River brought an ATV down and helped us get coolers in, and we were able to stock 94 Roanoke log perch that had been grown through conservation fisheries in Knoxville and at our conservation aquaculture. And it was a beautiful fall day. People had a really great time being a part of this reintroduction. We brought the animals down. They're all genetically tagged. I got out in the field, we tempered them, and we were able to release them into a historical location that they haven't been in hundreds of years. So the other species we worked on was the magnificent ram's horn. This is a federally endangered and state endangered. It actually became finally, the final rule was issued for protection under the act during this past year. And the goal of this was to reintroduce a species back into its historical range. It was living in 3 captive populations and did not, to our knowledge, exist on the landscape anymore. We're going to do this through ourselves on the Green Swamp Game Lands in Brunswick County under the safe harbor, and the proposal was approved in February. This is a map of where we're talking about. This is Brunswick County. It's near the mouth of the Cape Fear River. It was targeting the Swain Tract, and we had spent significant time over the last years modifying a pond, resloping it. We even revegetated it with plants from our aquatic nursery and been monitoring it with remote sensing equipment to ensure it had adequate habitat. We enrolled ourselves into a property owner management agreement and a certificate of inclusion. And then we're able to do a kind of soft release here on October 4th. This is the first time the species had seen wild water in over 30 years. And so we stocked these animals into these plant exclosures to see if this stocking was actually going to be viable. So you can see our staff here stocking. And we did have partners in attendance. And even PBS Science-C showed up to take some footage. And this is Amelia Omerberg. She is our snail biologist, and Amelia went out the next couple of weeks and swam with the alligator that lives there to monitor these snails. You can see her literally crawling around here in the weeds. And so she was looking to see if the snails established in the exclosures. And this is a picture of plants that we stocked with eggs and developing embryos on this critical plant. And then the snails were persisting, and they also were laying on the cages themselves. So after 4 weeks of monitoring, the snails were very, very happy. And so we decided to ramp up our communications outreach and stocking. And we ran press releases. We stocked over 2,000 of these animals back into this pond on November 16th. We were joined by multiple partners, and also a big hat off to our CMDE folks, because our press releases have been picked up by the Washington Post and even the country of India on this effort. And I don't know how Jonathan, our photographer, made snails look so good, but these are the prettiest pictures of snails I've ever seen. So this is just a really remarkable achievement for these species, and we've restored them to areas that they just haven't been in a very, very long time. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge all of the effort and all of the staff and the support of this commission. Try not to get choked up, right? For us to be able to get to this point. It's really a great achievement for conservation.
Great work.
Yeah.
That's good.
And we did it in a year. So that's also really great. And as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, this is the first of its kind for aquatic species.
And Rachel, you led the effort we all saw when we went to Marion and saw what you did up at the hatchery, where you took these ram horns from the hurricane, got them from the pond, and you figure out a way to save the species. So great credit to you as well.
Well, thank you, but it's not me. It's all of
It's
our
a team effort,
partners.
I know, but everything requires leadership. And I remember how you laid on us, what we got a wish list, everything you needed that day. And after that, you got $25,000 from a member of this commission to
That
help
is
move this thing
absolutely true.
forward. And I'd be remiss not to make a note of that as well.
Yes, all of that support has led us to this moment. I
Yeah.
really do appreciate everything. So do our staff.
You impressed him enough to get $25,000 out of his pocket. That was a good day's work that day too.
Well, so moving forward, we've got some other priorities. Our region, our program is split into 4 regions. And so the Western region is gonna continue to work on spotfin chub. This is a threatened species. We're still looking for the sweet spot combination, hence why you had an amendment today, an amendment request. And then we're gonna start planning for Appalachian elktoe. The foothills is continuing to enroll landowners and focus on Roanoke log perch. The central region is gonna continue to look for additional ponds within the historical range for magnificent ram's horn and to reintroduce. And the eastern region is waiting for the hatcheries to catch up, including the Yates Mill Aquaculture Center, which is launching very soon, will be operational at NC State's campus coming this spring. And so they're looking at species like yellow lance and Atlantic pigtoe. So we will be in the planning phases for those. And I just want to end with this question slide. Ken Bridle came out. He was a former member of NWAC and now serves at Piedmont Land Conservancy. And when he left NWAC, he had this Dwayne Raver original painting of a Roanoke log perch gifted to him. And he took it off of his wall and he brought it out with him to the site on the day that we released Roanoke log perch as the first reintroduction under the safe harbor. And it just really goes to show the years and work that have gone into making this happen and the dedication. So with that, I'll just take any questions if there are any, if I have time.
Thank you, Rachel.
Great, thank
Excellent
you.
work. Great presentation.
Okay, so the last item on our agenda is for membership of the NWAC or Non-Game Wildlife Advisory Committee. So every year we have nominees for this committee. We have a 15-member committee, and so 5 members every year are considered. So this year we had 12 nominations that were received and 3 requests for reappointment. 2 of the members have stepped down due to retirement or work on other projects. So we had 2 openings. And so we sent y'all the packet of nominees and the staff recommendations after our review of the nominations. So for the reappointments, we recommended reappointment of Sarah McRae from Fish and Wildlife Service, Judy Ratcliffe from the Natural Heritage Program, and Dr. Liz Rutledge from the Wildlife Federation. So those are the suggested reappointments. And for new members, we recommended David Cooper, who's an expert seat and who focuses on herpetofauna primarily. And second is Todd Ewing, who's now with SARP, NGO, and he would be a second expert affiliate on the committee. So those would be 2 new appointments. And so what we just asked for here in this meeting is if there's any comment or discussion about the staff recommendation, and these would then be brought forward tomorrow in the business meeting.
Any comments? We all received the nomination packages.
I know Liz Rutledge, and she's a fine lady.
Yeah,
And
she's great.
she'll contribute a lot. She runs the
With North Carolina
Hunters for the Hungry.
Yeah, she does. She's great. And she's also the vice chair of the committee now. Good.
Comments? I guess we'll move it to the business meeting.
Okay, and then that ends our
Thank you, Dr.
agenda.
Butler. Thank you. Any new business? Any other business? Not? Meeting is adjourned.
We'll have lunch off-site today as you want to, and we'll re-adjourn at 1:15 for the finance committee meeting. I guess if we can go to Ruckus or.
All right, going to call the Finance Audit and Compliance meeting to order. This electronic meeting is being streamed live for the public to attend and recorded as a public record. The recording of the meeting will be available at www.nslife.org. Ms. Winkler, will you please have a roll call?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm gonna do a roll call for our Finance, Audit and Compliance Committee members. Committee Chair Landon Zimmer.
Here.
Committee Vice Chair Brad Stanback.
Here.
Committee Member David Hoyle.
Here.
Committee Member John Coley. Committee Member Jim Ruffin.
Here.
Committee Member Mike Alford.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. We're going to start with Finance and Jason Cottle will present.
Thank you and good afternoon, everyone. We'll begin with an overview of year-to-date revenue and expenditure summaries in both our general and capital improvement funds. You'll see first that the visual layout of the data is a little different than what you're accustomed to at these finance committee meetings. Generally, we'll see a comparison of the same point in time from the prior year and identify the percent changes in the various categories. For anybody that may not already be aware, most of North Carolina state government has transitioned to a new financial system as of October 10. That has presented no shortage of challenges. Some of those anticipated, some of those caught us by surprise. But it's changed the way that we access the data, and in some instances, the way that the data is categorized. So the breakdown that I've got before you today may not be to the exact same level of detail that you're accustomed to seeing. Some things that have previously been itemized are now consolidated. So it was difficult to get a solid comparison of the current year data with the prior year. So rather than identify the individual categories, we'll just look at overall. Revenues in the general fund as of October 31st, $58,286,940.35. Expenditures in the same, and you can disregard this color coding. Expenditures in the same in the general fund year to date, $59,495,758.55. Both of those are tracking with the prior year overall. Revenues down just about 1% from this time last year. Expenditures down just about 3%. So any variance there is immaterial. Moving on to the capital improvement fund. See our total revenues in capital projects year to date of $2,569,178.67. And our total expenditures in the same as of October 31 are $3,307,962.14. Our revenues in the capital project fund are down about 24% from this period last year. But on the flip side, our expenditures are also down just about 20% from this point last year. I'll expect to see activity in both of those categories increase now that we've broken ground on San Marcan and several of our other projects are underway and moving forward. Moving on to our agency's endowment fund, and again, these balances will be as of October 31. We see an overall fund balance in the endowment fund of $156,911,308. As far as the asset allocation, we can see that we're currently at about 125 million in equities, or 79.7%. Our holdings in the bond index fund are just over 23 million, or just shy of 15%. And in our short-term investment fund, we've got about 8.4 million, or just a little better than 5%. These allocations are tracking with our goals that we set at our previous meeting, where we're aiming for an 80% equity allocation. So we're right on target with that. When we last met, I was unable to provide the expendable versus non-expendable income. We've got that information again. We have just over $44 million in expendable income. And we know that in the very short term, we're gonna need access to about 30 million of that for the projects at Setzer and San Marcan. So I wanted to display for everyone the most recent information that we have with regard to the rates of return on each of those three investment vehicles within the endowment fund. The most recent data that we've got is as of quarter ending September 30. We can see, excuse me, we can see the declining bond yields, or rather a continuing trend with the decline of the bond returns. Returns in the short-term investment fund are increasing slightly. And I wanted to bring this to everyone's attention because I know at the last meeting, we had decided to increase the amount that we were transferring monthly out of the bond index fund and into equities. But I think with our obligations at the forefront that we're going to have for those two projects I just mentioned, that it may not be in our best interest at this time to continue transferring funds into equities, that we may want to put some of those monies in the short-term investment fund where they'll be less susceptible to market volatility, even though we know that we're limiting the potential returns by doing so. Yes.
Yes, could you remind us all there? I'm looking at your form here. As y'all can see, the left side, the stiff has always positive numbers. That's because there's positive interest rates. It'd be a money, what kind of account is the stiff? Is it interest bearing?
It is interest bearing.
So it doesn't, you're not gonna have the volatility of the stock market, volatility of bonds. So that, you know, unless the US starts giving negative interest rates, that would remain positive in the short term while we have to fund these projects. And over how much period of time is that going to be that those projects are going to be funded, and how much is that going to be?
We know offhand, we're going to need 30 million in total for Setzer and San Marcan, about 20 for Setzer and about another additional 10 for San Marcan. And that's going to be over probably the next 3 fiscal years or so.
And and just looking at the next two columns, you can see there's negative up to 5.8. So say negative almost 6% there in the bond index fund at one point. You had negative 20, you know, when the market went down in 2020 as much, went down 16% almost last year. So tell me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but you're recommending moving that additional bond index fund, which was how much, which was what, remind me?
23.4 million is what we currently hold in bonds.
23.4, and how much is in the stiff right now?
Right now, 8.4 million.
So you're recommending to move the remaining, or you're saying move those remaining bonds instead of moving into the volatile equities, you're saying move them into the stiff.
Yes, and I think that would secure at least enough funding for those two projects for the time being without having to worry about the impact of any potential market downturn should it occur before we get this one.
And y'all can see that'd be 8.4 plus 23.4 would be about 31.8, which should cover all of our commitments there. I don't think we need a motion in this committee, do we?
Just make sure that the finance committee is okay with and make this recommendation for the commission to approve tomorrow.
So committee, discuss your thoughts on that. If we proceed there, what does everybody think on that? Moving that remaining bond funds into the short-term interest fund.
That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I don't see any problem with that. I do have a question though on the cash that we have, the stiff funds. Where's that money come from other than just through allocating it at this meeting? I mean, is there another source of revenue or source of funding for that account?
That's where the sales from the lifetime licenses go.
And how much does that average per year?
I don't have that at the ready, so
Where I'm going with that is it's a 3-year project. And so I'm just wondering, you know, in the future, we're gonna have to put more money in that, of course, to pay for projects, and how much is that offset by income that we'd be having anyway? But is what I'm trying to get at. We might not have the answer today. I'm still in favor of doing what we said. I just was curious.
yeah, I'd have to go back and do a little bit of research before I could give you what we anticipate annually in license.
Just kind of project what will be happening over the next 3 years with transfers and such. Okay, thank you.
Would you move it all in one swoop or would you stagger it?
What we had discussed was going ahead and transferring out that balance in one lump sum. But that's certainly open for discussion with you all.
I was just thinking of some timing issues there, but I'm not a prognosticator, so if we refer to you.
I think it was prudent to move money into the equity fund gradually over time, so we leveled out fluctuations month to month. But for this purpose, I would say go ahead and move it from the bond fund all at once.
Comfortable with that. If we do move it, if we have a motion and decide to move it tomorrow, what's the date today? Sixth. When would it be transferred into the STIF? How long?
So
would it take?
we're, have a very narrow window that we can make those requests with the state treasurer. We would do so within 5 days prior to the month's end. And then we'd see that transfer credited with the first of January.
So I guess we do risk in the next 30 days, something bad happening and that going down. In order to prevent that, could we say there's I guess if the bond index fund goes down more than, what are y'all comfortable with, 5%? Is that if it goes down more than 5%, we don't transfer, but if it stays within 5% of where it is now on the downside, we transfer all of it. That works, okay. So we'll look to probably make that motion tomorrow to move the remaining bond. It's fun. Any further discussion, comments? All right, thanks, Jason. Keep going.
All right. Thank you all. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. All right. Next, Steve Chase with audit and compliance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, commissioners, WRC staff, everybody here. This afternoon, I'd just like to give a brief update on audit and compliance activities since we last met. There are 4 areas I'd like to just touch on briefly. Agenda items: Go Outdoors reporting, Go Outdoors a survey, just the purchasing card review, and the internal audit staffing. All right, this is a click the arrow.
Yeah, arrow or.
So as Jason just mentioned, we transitioned from the old Alvin system, which kept track of all of our licenses and all the revenue and all the accounting on July 1st. And its name is Go Outdoors now. And this has been transferred to a third-party provider. Previously in Alvin was a homegrown system. We had control of it. We could do with it whatever and whenever we needed to make it work. But it had, what do they say, grown long in the teeth and needed to be replaced. Anyway, so with this new Go Outdoors NC application or platform and a third-party provider, there you encounter risk because you don't know. As you know, like before we had control of Alvin, there was risk there, but at least we could address whatever it was. Now we're relying on Brandt and the folks at Brandt to take care of it. So with that said, we looked at it and I thought, well, you know, and there's a lot of reporting, just as Jason mentioned, you know, the reporting of the endowment fund income, the expendable versus non-expendable, and a ton of other reporting. So crafted or just came up with the idea that we should at least take a look at the reporting that's coming out of the GoNC system, because new account coding, new accounting, new titles in some instances. So we lost our familiarity with our old titles and our old accounting codes and all that minutia. And now we're relying on, again, Brandt to get it right and for us to get it right. So, so I think it's going to be a good idea to go ahead and just test some reports to make sure that they tie to the underlying detail. A point I want to make is that Jason and his group and the whole Brandt GoNC implementation team have been working on project or on problem identification, testing, problem resolution since day one. So it's not like I'm coming in and saying, you know, this is right and this is wrong, and you guys don't know what you're doing. It's just I'm going to be augmenting what Jason and his team are doing. So the next steps for me is to develop a planning memo, which you normally do in an audit prior to beginning the audit, and a review program to go in and basically lay out the work plan to say, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna look at these many reports. I'm going to test the accuracy of the calculations, the counts of the licenses, and whatever else we come up with. So that's the Go Outdoors NC reporting. We'll be getting started on the planning memo and the program methodology this month, and hopefully going to field work in January. So that's it for Go Outdoors NC. The next agenda item, Go Outdoors NC survey. When we initially implemented Go NC Outdoors, Go Outdoors NC back in July, as one would expect, there were a lot of calls from a lot of people trying to buy licenses, register their vessels and all that. So there was a concern and an idea that we needed to do something to get an idea of, how big that problem is. And what can we do to fix it? So we decided to kind of let the system settle down and the constituents and the license, the customers, get some experience with Go NC. Because like any other new IT application, it takes time to get used to it. So I think in Q4 of this fiscal year, and maybe even in Q1 of next fiscal year, which would be like March of next year, or I'm sorry, July of next year, we'll send out a survey just to say, okay, now you've had a year's worth of experience with buying your license, registering your boat, whatever you're doing. Do you like it now? Is it better now than it was on July 1st? And we can take that and say, okay, if there are still problems that are chronic or systemic, we can address those problems and fix them. Next item is purchasing card review, and that's the normal. There's a quarterly process using Microsoft Power BI where we take all the P-card transactions, and again, we do about 18,000 P-card transactions a year. So we'll take a quarter's worth of transactions and run them through the Power BI application to identify any outliers, things that look a little squirrely. In a lot of cases, there are explanations for squirrely items, but we want to make sure that we look at everything that A, is a legit exception, and B, if there are any real exceptions to the rule or non-compliance, then we identify them and get them corrected, remediated. So I'll be updating the purchasing card review, and I'll have some results for you at the next meeting. Last but not least, being a one-person audit shop, since I started here, I have myself, and there are other one-person audit shops in the state. We've been getting heat saying you guys need at least one more audit, maybe two more auditors. So we muddled through, I muddled through, and did the best we could. And but we finally have an addition to the internal audit office staff. So I'd like to introduce Larry Conrad back here in the red shirt. He started back in October. He's been with the agency about 7 years, or 7.5 years, something like that. And he's the other set of hands and eyes that can look at, detailed programs. I've had to do some training, again, because he was at WRC here, but he wasn't in an audit function. So we've gone through and, constantly going through this process, that process, what the commission does, all that. And as Jason mentioned, there are a lot of reports, not only from Go Outdoors NC, but also from NCFS, which went live on October 10th. So I have Larry going through all the reports, downloading them, going through them, making notes about the information they contain. Because again, in all cases, our whole reporting package for both platforms have changed. So it's taking us time to get familiarized with the new report. So let me just suffice it to say that I am glad Larry is here looking at all those reports. Thank you, Larry.
Sure.
And with that, that concludes my talk. Are there any questions?
Questions?
Yes,
I
sir.
I have a comment. I know that I've been up online and updated my license since we last met, and that was a great experience. Bought a Yukon mug, maybe a backpack also. So it was great. Really enjoyed the experience and I can imagine the reviews will be great at our next meeting.
Thank you for your business.
Certainly happy to do it.
Any other questions?
I don't know too.
Hearing none, thank you.
All right. Well, any other new additional topics? Questions, comments? All right, that concludes our committee meeting.
10-minute break.
Wes Segers, Committee Vice Chair David Hoyle.
Here.
Committee Member Tommy Fumble. Committee Member Steve Wyndham. Committee Member John Stone.
Here.
Committee Member J.C. Cole.
Yeah.
Mr. Vice Chair, you have a quorum.
Harry Ruhlman.
Okay.
This whole meeting's just for you.
Just for me, okay.
That's the truth.
All right, so the first thing we have to go over today is proposed amendments for readoption of one of our endangered, threatened, and special concern species rules. This rule is related to the take, possession, sale, propagation, transportation, importation, exportation, transfer, barter, trade, and stocking of endangered, threatened, and special concern species. This is part of the periodic review, so this rule does have to be readopted. In going through it, we found that it was a bit outdated in some of the requirements and the references, which we updated to clarify and help with regulations of the activities involved with permitting for endangered species. So we updated some of the situations for which individuals can obtain a permit. Things like scientific investigation, exhibition, and education, clarifying requirements for those individuals to obtain a permit, specifying requirements for permit applications, and updating some requirements for take of species without a permit. So are there any questions on these, or this one rule?
Any questions?
No? Okay, we'll move on then. All right, so the next thing on the agenda is the annual rule cycle. So during the 2023 long session, there were some changes made to the Administrative Procedures Act, which is the law that we have to follow to make rules. One of the modifications was the removal of the language that allowed for agencies to adopt a permanent rule as a temporary rule if the permanent version got 10 or more letters of objection. So in our annual cycle rulemaking, we do quite a bit of it, and we do it every year. It's very consistent. And this change could present a problem for us because we might not be able to manage things as quickly as we need to in some cases. Things like seasons, bag limits, game lands, things like that, if we get 10 letters. We also have a number of rules that kind of depend on each other. So our deer rules, our game land rules depend on our deer season rules, things like that. So they're interconnected. If we need to change one, we have to change both of them. So our ability to adopt a temporary rule, if we get 10 letters of objection to our permanent rule, is something that we use from time to time. Part of the reason for that is because our annual rule cycle spans 2 calendar years. So we start in April of any given calendar year. Behind the scenes, staff start talking about the annual cycle rules for the next cycle. You all see those in July in the committees. There's a presentation on what staff think should go or not go for the next seasons. In August, it goes to the Rules Committee. In October, you all vote to notice text. We have a 2-month public comment period that spans December through January of the following year. We have our January public hearings. And then in February, all those rules come back to you to vote to adopt. Now, because of the way that meeting schedules go, those rules don't go to the Rules Review Commission for approval until usually April. And then they all have an August 1st effective date. So
2 calendar years in there. The issue is if we get 10 letters of objection at that April RRC meeting. At that point, the rules would go to the next regular session of the General Assembly that begins at least 25 days after that April date when they were approved by the RRC. And because it's in April, we either miss the start of that session for that year, or we're like a week ahead of the short session when it starts. So we don't have that 25 days to get us to that session. So what that does is that kicks us to the next calendar year when the next regular session begins. So that means that 10 letters of objection delays our rulemaking process for anywhere from a year to 2 years. So that's where we currently are. We were asked to come up with some options for how things might change. There aren't many options for us. But we did come up with this, a proposed annual rule schedule that helps us get to that next regular session of the General Assembly should we get 10 letters. So this doesn't exactly fix the problem. There's no mechanism to get us where we were essentially, but it'll get us through the process quicker if we get the objections. So the big difference is this cycle falls all within 1 calendar year. And the kicker is we get to the November meeting of the RRC, which always consistently puts us into the next session of the General Assembly. So if we are to get 10 letters, it won't take 2 years to get our rule back, because we can't make a temporary rule the same as that permanent rule. So the annual cycle, the big change is that the annual cycle would occur the calendar year before the changes become effective. So for example, in 2024, we would go through the 2025-26 annual rulemaking cycle that would become effective not until that following year, which is a little different from what we're used to doing. But like I said, if we get 10 letters of objection for any of those rules, we'd go to the next session. So this is an option. That's where we're at right now. That's what we could do. It does also require changing the commission meeting schedules to line up a little better with the annual cycle rulemaking schedule. So the August meeting, we don't really need for rulemaking anymore. We do need a June meeting because instead of proposing rules in October, like you all have for the past 15 years, we would propose rules in June. And then our public hearings, instead of being in January, would be in August. And then instead of voting to notice things in October, you'd be voting to adopt rules in October. Still have an August 1st effective date, but in the proposed cycle, we would make it to that November RRC meeting. So it lines up better with the sessions of the General Assembly. Are there any questions? So many questions.
Mike, got any questions?
Okay, I'll say, I know I've been involved in this and working with, and Wes has been too, and he can't be here today, obviously, but given the circumstances, I think Carrie, this schedule, what she provided is as good as it gets. And my hat's off to you, because I think this is the best path to take. So we don't have that 1 to 2 year gap without ability to put rules in effect. Because you understand what this is doing. This is buttoning us up at the beginning of a legislative session, hopefully by January or February, and you don't have that big lengthy period doing so. Her figuring this out was good day's work here.
So I do want to mention this, we didn't lose our ability to make temporary rules. We still have the ability to do that. We just can't do it if we get 10 letters on a permanent rule. So that's what the big change is. And we've used that provision many times in the past. Yeah.
But this will mean, and it'll lay on the schedule, we will have to change next year's meeting schedule that we adopted at the last meeting. And we'll review that later on in the Cal later on this afternoon, just to let you know what the result of that be. We won't have an August meeting anymore. With that August meeting will go to June.
Any other questions? Comments? There you got anything else?
No, that's all I have.
Just to be noted, we are 30 minutes early. We expected a lot more questions, a lot more time on this one. But
Maybe everybody
Carrie,
needs to digest.
but you got it down. So we'll start the cow at 2:00. We got time if Brad Howard wants to speak. No. No. We'll start the committee of the whole meeting at 2:00. The call to order the December 6th, 2023 meeting of the Committee of the Whole of the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. This electronic meeting is being streamed live for the public to attend and recorded as a public record. The recording of the meeting will be available at www.ncwildlife.org. And at this time, I would ask Margot Minkler to do a roll call of committee members present.
I'm going to do a roll call for a committee of whole. Committee Chair Monty Crump,
Here.
Committee Vice Chair Mark Craig,
Here.
Committee Member David Hoyle.
Here.
John Coley, Wes Seegers, Tommy Fumble, Tom Barry,
Here.
Brad Stanback,
Here.
Jim Ruffin.
Here.
Ray Clifton,
Here.
Kelly Davis. Here. Steve Wyndham, Lenny Zimmer,
Here.
John Stone.
Here.
Aiden Rogers, John Alexander, Tom Hayslip.
Here.
J.C. Cole.
Yes.
Mike Alford.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Margot. And at this time, I'd recognize Melva Bonner to present permanent rulemaking and adoption related to hunter education course rules and petition for rulemaking from New Hanover County, reference extension to no wake zone on Bradley Creek. Melva?
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, everyone. The first rulemaking item on the agenda today is for the permanent readoption of the 10K Hunter Education Course Rules, Exhibits F1 and F2, which includes 10K0101 course requirements, 10K0102 issuance of certificate of competency, 10K0103 instructor certification. The rules in the subchapter were determined to be necessary with substantive public interest or required to be readopted as part of the periodic review. For 10K0101, 10K0102, 10K0103, the proposed rule language has been updated to reduce redundancy with the general statute and to align with the current rule formatting requirements. 10K01, the amendments clarify the hunter education courses completed in other states and providences are recognized if the course meets or exceeds the International Hunter Education Association standards. For 10K0103, the proposal also removes the allowance for an abbreviated hunter education instructor course for teachers and individuals certified as instructors in other states. And it also increases the passing score for hunter education instructors from 75% to 80%. Here we have the amended rule text, 10K0101, 10K0102, and 10K0103. The proposed amendments were noticed in the North Carolina Register on October 2nd, 2023, and a public hearing was held on November 14, 2023. For 10K0101 course requirements, we received one public comment not in support of the rule proposal. For 10K0102 and 10K0103, we did not receive any public comments. Staff will be recommending the permanent readoption of these proposed rules at tomorrow's business meeting. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions? Hearing none, move forward, Melvin.
The second and final rulemaking item on the agenda today is for the petition received for 10F0314 New Hanover County. In accordance with 10A0401 and 10A0402, the executive director received a petition for rulemaking on October 5th, 2023. This petition was for the proposal and was distributed to via email to all commissioners for consideration on October 6, 2023. The petitioner requested that a no-wake zone at the mouth of Bradley Creek be moved 400 feet closer to the intra-coastal waterway to alleviate safety issues. Here we have the proposed amended rule text with the new coordinates for the extension of the 400 feet near the mouth of Bradley Creek. Here we have the map. This is the current no-wake zone for New Hanover County. And this is where we're proposing, or the petitioner is requesting to extend the additional 400 feet for the addition of the no-wake zone. Staff will be requesting approval to notice the proposed amendment for 10F0304 for New Hanover County to open a 60-day public comment period and to hold one public hearing at tomorrow's business meeting. Are there any questions?
Great, Lynn. Thank you. While this is going through, we don't want to slow down the public comments. Can we have enforcement look at a study here and see what, after further review, what they recommend and come out with?
They'll do that. If this is voted to go to public hearing tomorrow, they will automatically go in and do a matrix on to this request to have ready to provide the commission after the public hearings are received.
This is not to approve the recommendation. This is to further study. And
This
go
is
forward.
to call for a public hearing, and then the wildlife will go out and do another matrix with the formula that we have and come back with a recommendation to council, to the commission after the public comments have been
So
received.
it could be this, could be less, could be more, could be.
Exactly.
Okay.
And we always, put great weight on what they come back when they do a matrix, but we just did this wake zone earlier, and it's presented some problems to a property owner or two, and that's what has necessitated them asking for this petition to take a look at further to mitigate some of the issues there, and then that's what we'll do if commission agrees to put it out for public hearing and wildlife, the officers do their new matrix.
Well, again, what's the problem now? Do we know?
There's some problem with overwash, whatever, that's what's preventing, that's what is having the property owner want to do the extension, that they're slowing down before they get there, and it's creating a large wake, and that is problematic at the end. And so and he's got a right to petition. And of course, this is the third one we've done in the last, 18 months or so. So that's I think they went to the county folks, and they did not want to do it. So that's why he went the petition process. Is that correct, Betsy? Okay, so he took it upon himself to petition the commission to do what this action is that you see in front of you now. All right. So
Before we had a no wake zone, now we've got a wake zone, but he wants to extend a little further because he don't. Okay. It
Well,
didn't include
if
him.
I understand just a brief, yeah, that's the problem. It didn't go far enough out that when they come out of the intercoastal waterway, whatever, they're slowing down, creating a wake, and that's what we'll evaluate on the matrix. Assuming that the commission approves this tomorrow. Are there any other questions? Everybody understand the effect of what this does with approval tomorrow? Are there any concerns with it or comments or anything want to be addressed today? We discuss tomorrow. Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Mel.
Thank you.
Mr. Ingham, you want to talk about a revised commission schedule based on Carrie's presentation? And the legislature giving us another gift.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mine will not be near as complicated as Carrie's was. I'm gonna stick with the dates. And as you see in Exhibit N, and we'll bring forward to the commission with recommended approval tomorrow during the business meeting. The new schedule of dates will be all on Thursdays, be February 22nd of 2024, April 18th of 2024 that we previously discussed being offsite, June 2nd, 2024, July 25th, 2024, October 3rd, 2024, and lastly, December 5th, 2024. And again, I'll bring this, staff will bring this as a recommendation for approval tomorrow.
Are there any questions or comments, concerns? I think we covered that earlier with Carrie's presentation. What necessitated this change? Hearing none. Have something else, Mr. Ingram? Move forward.
Yes, next on the agenda is we're gonna recognize some staff for awards. I'll start by explaining that our last commission meeting, we recognized some of our staff, some were not able to be here, so the one that I'll be presenting, I'll really pull it up. The one I'll be talking about and presenting is a governor's award for excellence. If Boone and Becker, if you'll come up, if you will. And I'm going to read the nomination. I've abbreviated the nomination just for time, but these two special officers wear the uniform proud and definitely have shown the professionalism and excellence that makes this agency so proud for them to be a part of it. On October 23rd, 2022, while patrolling Lake James, Officer William Boone became aware that a boater had been stung by a bee and was experiencing anaphylactic shock. Officer Boone informed Raleigh Communications as well as McDowell EMS of the medical emergency. He then instructed the boaters to travel towards Black Bear Access Area to meet with EMS. Master Officer Richard Becker heard the radio transmissions and responded to assist Officer Becker with this dire emergency. Upon arrival, the officers were informed that the patient was unconscious with a pulse and was experiencing shallow, inconsistent breathing. It was at this point that Officer Boone made the decision that he could not wait on EMS and that he had his personal EpiPen that needed to be administered. Officer Boone injected the patient in the right thigh with the EpiPen and notified Raleigh Communications that this medication had been administered. With the continual decline of the vital signs of the patient, Officer Boone and Officer Becker determined that a second dose of the EpiPen was needed. Officer Becker, also having a personal EpiPen, administered a second dose of the EpiPen to the patient. Officer Boone then informed the Raleigh Communications that the second dose had been administered. Upon receipt of this second dose, though he was still unconscious, the patient began to breathe normally and his pulse turned to be steady. Approximately 10 minutes after both doses of EpiPen were administered, EMS arrived on the scene. EMS personnel determined that a third dose of the medication was needed and administered to the patient. After the third dose, the patient finally regained consciousness and was loaded into an ambulance and transported to a nearby medical facility. It is because of their selfless act of providing life-saving care to an individual who was in desperate need that it is my pleasure to recognize Senior Officer William Boone and Master Officer Richard Becker for the Governor's Award for Excellence for the category of safety and heroism. Thank you. And Mr. Chair, with your permission, we're going to have another award here, but at the conclusion of the committee of the whole, we'd like to take some pictures with these recipients.
Okay, carry on. So you ready to recognize Gary at this time? Gary Gardner?
Thanks, everyone. Wanted to take just a minute to give a few updates on SOBA, on a recent award we won, and some other news on SOBA. For those who aren't familiar, SOBA is the state's organization for boating access. Our agency is actively participating in the last several years. SOBA is a national nonprofit organization really dedicated to improving access to waterways. We've got state boating officials from majority of the states as well as 5 territories, but also other engineering firms, consultants, manufacturers, suppliers, and those type of companies also participate in SOBA. So the most recent SOBA symposium was held this last August in Tacoma, Washington, and we received the 2023 Outstanding Project Award for the Wrightsville Beach Boating Access Area. This was our 10th award through SOBA overall and the 8th we've won in the last 7 years. The Wrightsville Beach Boating Access Project was one of the bigger ones we've undertaken in the last few years. The site beforehand had fixed docks on the side and bulkheads in a breakwater that had really reached the end of life. You kind of see here the old fixed docks were angled down so that they were accessible at different tide levels, but that created quite a maintenance headache as well as slip hazards as they built up algae. This is probably one of our busiest sites in the state. The Google Earth imagery here shows every parking spot taken and people lined up to put in. It's busy year round. You can go on a sleeting day. I've been in sleet in February and people are putting boats in and out pretty regularly. So we knew we were going to have a lot of issues with trying to keep the site open as much as we could and as little impact to the public. So we worked with Fairley's team with CMDE post on a website, social media, press releases, signage on site, and even had the local news run a little news piece on it just to try to get the word out there and make folks as aware as possible. But our goal was still to minimize any closures to the ramp. So we tried to stage the construction. We had a contractor working on replacing the old wooden walls with vinyl sheet pile. Multiple crews worked on this. You can see some more of the sheet pile going in on the old bulkhead. When they completed work, Chinquapin construction crew was right on hand here putting in the abutments. And then as soon as those had set, these guys went on back to their next job, and the crew from Green Swamp and the lower staff actually installed the docks. So really quick turnaround for a project like this. Work began January 24th of this year, finished on March 1st. And we're able to keep 3 of the 5 ramps open through the entire duration of the project for the public to continue using it. You can kind of see the new ramps, new bulkheads, all squared away. So we submitted this award, or this project, for an award with SOBA and received the award. This is Steve Bailey, one of our engineers who was present at the symposium, receiving this on behalf of Michael Leggett, who was the lead engineer on this project, but it really was a group effort. Michael had a lot of assistance, Dean Barbie and the construction crew, as well as Darren's crew with Jason Sellers out of the Green Swamp Depot. Moving on from there, the next news I have is that we will be hosting the 2024 SOBA Symposium. It'll be August 26th through the 29th at the Hotel Ballast in Wilmington. We're expecting probably in excess of 200 folks attending this. Since COVID, the attendees have gone up from about 180 last year in Tacoma, about 120 the year before that in Cleveland. We expect this to be a big draw. There's a lot of work underway. Melanie and her team are finishing up a little video for us that Director Ingram's filmed a section for last week. Working on pulling together speakers, exhibitors, and of course, sponsors are a big part of this. So we're already starting to send out prospectus and letters and reaching out to possible sponsors. This goes a long way into relaying a lot of the costs for the folks trying to come, have the opportunity to provide giveaways, sponsor some of the social events and that type of thing. So if anyone knows of anybody, suppliers, manufacturers who may be interested in that, please let me or director's office know. We'll be glad to reach out to them. But we just wanted to highlight this real quick. It's a big deal for us to put on a symposium this big. And so but we're looking forward to highlighting what we do, highlighting North Carolina and Wilmington as well. So any questions on any of that? That's all I've got. Thank you. Oops,
Okay,
I guess.
next we'll move to CWD update. Brad Howard.
Just a real quick update. We're through both the mandatory testing periods in both the surveillance area 1 and surveillance area 2. I think most everyone's aware we picked up another positive, this one in Johnston County and then one in Franklin County. And just this week, we picked another positive up in Cumberland County, which is not a new county. That's where the one that started the SA2 goes. Just wanted to highlight the testing and what's going on in the 12 county surveillance area 1, where we've collected 7,412 samples, 2,271 in surveillance area 2 and then about 9,400 for outside the rest of the state. So we're at 19,000 samples this year. And that means our folks are out there, and a lot of these are coming from processors and taxidermists and freezer drops, but all of our folks are out there pulling these samples, processing them, getting the data sheets in, getting them submitted to the lab. The most recent positive that we returned this week from Cumberland County, the deer was killed on November the 9th. We got to report back on December the 4th. So that's about a 3-week turnaround. And our guys can't do any better than that out there. So kudos to all of them that are working very long hours out there and getting this done. That's really all I had, Mr. Chairman, unless there were some questions or comments. Yes, sir. Have any of the deer that we've tested been symptomatic prior to testing? Not visibly symptomatic, no.
These are mostly just normal acting deer.
I tell you what, Brad, I'm about to faint if you're through, and that's one of the short.
I got 2 or 3 presentations in my pocket.
I mean,
If you
you
want,
think something wrong with it? You think we need to have him tested?
I had one question, but I'm not gonna ask.
Oh,
it.
well, I'm gonna turn it over to Christian because he's got 2 hours worth of stuff from what I understand.
Thank you, Brad.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I do have 2 topics. Hopefully it will not be 2 hours. So the first one is update on the Roanoke River striped bass. Seems like every opportunity I get to stand up here, we end up talking about Roanoke River striped bass. But in this case, just as a quick reminder, the Albemarle Sound Management Area and the Roanoke River Management Area stock assessment was updated in 2022 with data through 2021. So that stock assessment determined that the population was overfished and overfishing is occurring. That required an additional reduction in the total allowable landings. And so for the upcoming 2024 season, for all fisheries for the entire system, would be 8,349 pounds. Of that 8,349 pounds, only 2,087 pounds would actually be allocated to the Roanoke River. So essentially there's nothing there to fish on based on the stock assessment. So DMF has taken several actions as it relates to the Albemarle Sound Management Area. They did not open the fall recreational fishery. So that action has already taken place. And they informed the Marine Fisheries Commission at their meeting on November 16th that the Albemarle Sound Management Area, both the commercial and recreational fishery, will not open for harvest in 2024. So so there will not be a striped bass fishery in the Albemarle Sound, the entire management area. So that brings us to what do we do for the Roanoke River? And looking beyond the stock assessment, we have, I would say, really good data through our spring electrofishing surveys. And we have been documenting and seeing declining abundance for some time. In fact, last year and this year was the lowest catch punit effort that we've recorded on record. So we really feel, even going back into the 90s when it was considered basically collapsed, we're seeing conditions that are just as bad. We're seeing very few larger, older fish. And the big story, which we've been talking about, is we've had recent poor year classes. Really haven't had a good year class since 2015. That was the last strong year class. So 8 years without a really good year class. And in fact, this year, the older fish that we saw on the spawning grounds were age 8. So they correspond back to that 2015 year class. So with that said, staff, after a lot of debate and trying to decide, how to proceed, we really think that the best recommendation is just simply not open the Roanoke River Management Area for harvest in 2024. At best, it would have been a 1-day season, maybe a 2-day season, based on the total allowable landings. We're just at a position where we don't think we should have that fishery. With that said, I'm coming today to kind of get your concurrence with that. That would be implemented through a proclamation issued by Commissioner Ingram Commissioner Director Ingram, and he would, we would get that publicized as quickly as possible to make sure that folks are aware of the fishery, that there would not be a harvest season. Still be allowed to fish, it just wouldn't be a harvest season. And then, of course, we plan to come back in February at, I believe, a Fisheries Committee meeting and present more detailed information and present more detailed information about what it might mean to allow, when we would allow harvest again. And that's what I have for the Roanoke River, unless there are any questions.
Is there any other reason other than overfishing for this population decline?
So yes, so we've, the overfishing and overfished designation is a bit of a scientific technical terminology. So there has been, we have fished heavier on the population than it could sustain. But the reason why it can't sustain that is because there hasn't been successful reproduction in about 8 years. There's been enough reproduction to maintain animals in the system, but not to allow significant harvests like the population has supported in the past. And one other thing that we're doing that we talked about previously is, this year was the first year that we stocked fish. So we're hoping that that'll kind of seed the population and we can hopefully get a good year class in the next few years. But, and we plan to stock for at least the next 2 years through that process. But it's really, we're trying to figure out why there isn't natural reproduction.
Thank you. Yes. And I hate to ask you to do this and then don't answer if you don't want to, but is there a suspect on why reproduction has dropped so significantly?
So yes, there's multiple suspects here. Originally we thought, and we still do, we think this is part of it, is it's just water quality conditions. We've had a tropical storm that may come through in the late summer, if that could impact the juveniles or the fry, depending on when it comes through. Flows in the river, if we get a heavy rain event right around spawning, water can push those eggs downstream. If it's a drought year or we don't get enough rain, then it doesn't push the eggs down. A lot of work was done back in the 90s that would indicate that flow was an issue. And some of that was corrected, and we attribute some of the recovery back in the late 90s, early 2000s to the fact that the flow regime was better. And from probably about 2017 to 2021, somewhere in there, 2021, what we noticed was that we were getting weather that was inopportune. And so we really thought it was environmental related, and it probably was in part. But these last couple of years, we've had much better flows, much better conditions, and we still haven't seen recovery. So we're beginning to be concerned that it may be related to the quality of eggs that are being produced. And is it potentially contaminant related? We're searching all avenues really to try to determine.
I guess that's a great answer. Thank you.
Any other questions about striped bass? Okay. With that, we'll move on to joint fishing orders, another topic that comes back. So just to give y'all an update, at the Marine Fisheries Commission on November 16th, their legal counsel proposed changes to 15A NCAC 3Q0106. And this is a quote: to address the continuing and consistent assertion by the WRC that it has exclusive authority over hook and line in joint fishing orders. And so just to remind you, 03Q0106 is a joint rule. We have a sister rule, which is 10C0106, and those two were adopted jointly years ago and can't be basically changed or amended without, again, a joint action of the two commissions. But he proposed it, and the proposed changes basically strike the existing rule text, and that would completely it strikes it completely, and it replaces it with new text. And that was subsequently a motion unanimously passed to approve that notice of text pending the Office of State Budget Management's approval of a regulatory impact analysis. So they're starting the rulemaking process, and their commission basically made a motion to make that happen. So here's what they're proposing. It would basically remove, at least based on their 03010Q, of course, our 10CO, talking too fast here. Our their 03Q 0106 is what they propose to change. Our 10C 0106, would remain in place and actually be in conflict with what they're proposing. And so they propose that, except for specific inland game fish, which those are in statute, things like largemouth bass, crappie, those are examples, for which the WRC has full authority no matter where they occur. All coastal fishing rules and regulations adopted by the MFC shall apply to joint waters. And then they went on in another section and said that all inland fishing rules and regulations adopted by the WRC pertaining to freshwater species shall apply in joint fishing waters. Part of the problem is there is no actual legal definition of what a freshwater species is. Then the third kind of main component of it said that in the event of a conflict between the rules adopted by the two commissions that are related to marine and estuarine resources, MFC rules will supersede all other rules in joint fishing waters. One of the big problems with this one is that in joint fishing waters, legally, each animal is both a marine, or each fish, I should say, is a marine and estuarine resource, and it is also a wildlife resource. So that's why, both commissions have authority. So this is what they have proposed. At this point, I guess we have not seen any further. They'll be doing a economic impact analysis, and this is where this stands for now. So I'll be glad to take any questions.
I wish I had that kind of authority and that arrogance to say MFC rules will supersede all other rules in joint waters and ignore the statutes and everything else. That's pretty neat trick there, isn't it? To
They wish
attempt.
they had that authority too, but.
They wish it, but just because you wish upon a star like this is, doesn't mean it's going to occur. But you see what we're dealing with, folks.
Where does this
I-
end?
Who knows where it ends? That's a great question. Have no earthly idea. But I think in court, but they have been fighting this since we started delineation of waters, and I thought it was clear in the governor's office, just like everybody else did, that was, we were told to readopt joint waters with hook and line authority as described in the statute, and both did it, and they're not adhering to the guardrails, and that's, I just think it's absolute arrogance, and this is what the kind of stuff that makes people shake their head about government. It's just I don't know anything else how to say. I see the look in some of y'all's faces about, wow. But we're going to look at it and see how it goes forward, and we'll legal action, governor solve it, whatever. But I wish I had an answer to your question, Commissioner Ruffin. I really did, but I don't know where it ends. But when you can make the rules up as you go and ignore rules and ignore statute, I don't know, and nobody, and they're never held accountable. I don't know where the ending is. But we'll get there one day. We hope. Thank you. But Christian, appreciate it.
Yes, sir. And I will say, as far as the process goes, this notice to text would have to go to the Rules Review Commission, but it can't go to the Rules Review Commission until they have the economic impact analysis.
Yeah.
So when we learn of that information, we will share it.
And what we would hope to do is when it gets to Rules Review Commission, like it did last time when they pulled similar stuff, that the Rules Review Commission will look at it and say it's legitimate joint rules, and they have to. Yeah. Oh, yeah. We'll do that, and then we'll go to Rules Review Commission state our case once again. Then we'll go from there. Anything else you want to say, Mr. Ruffin?
No, I've heard enough.
Oh, my gosh. Okay. Are there any other topics anybody wants to bring up before I close up with a couple comments? Anybody has anything else? You all know that the legislature passed a bill to basically affected most boards and commissions in the state. Our board, our commission was affected by the fact that the General Assembly, we will be adding two new members, one from the House and one from the Senate, and both of those have already been appointed, and they're in their ethics process right now. And in 2025, one of the governor's appointments to this board will revert to the Secretary of
Agriculture.
Yeah, Commissioner of Agriculture, who will have an appointment to this board. And then from that point on, that's the way the commission will be constituted. But unless and until, there was a court case, and it's currently going on now, challenging the constitutionality of this and the executive branch versus the legislative branch, and what's an executive function and what's a legislative function, and we're caught in that process. You've seen Tamara come in here a couple times talking to me and Cam them, but the governor's office has asked each boards and commission to chairmans to provide an affidavit about what their boards and commissions do, the scope of the work, the decisions they make, how it affects, looking for a way to determine what's an executive branch function versus a legislative branch function, a separation of powers. So we have been working on that affidavit since yesterday afternoon. And I think we're just about through with that now, which I'll sign today. They need it back today because I think they had the first preliminary hearing on it this Friday. So, and some boards and commissions actions have already been stayed by the judicial panel. And then ours was not involved in that one. We are involved in the next one. So I wanted to give you an update on that and explain that situation. To that end, and obviously if we had all 19 commissioners here, we've got a full table, full room. And then we're gonna talk about adding two more. What we met in here yesterday and what we have decided, what I've asked staff to do is to look at a complete redo of this room, a new table with a new format, whether it's a U, a T on the end, how to deal with 21 commissioners here and our staff, because they're crucial to this process, and keep them during the meeting, how we can make all of that work. So I tasked Cam and them yesterday to come up with a new outlay, give us 2 or 3 proposals about what a new table, AV, all that stuff would look like. And so I just wanted to, I know some of you had questions about that. So that's a briefing on the first one. And the second one, we're getting prepared to deal with onboarding 2 more commissioners and being able to manage the room and the meetings and have staff and everything here without stepping over one another. Are there any questions about any commissioners about either one of those things?
I know who the commissioner is from the Senate. Do we know who the one is from the House?
Yes.
May I ask?
It's Reed Smith.
Reed Smith.
Yes.
Oh, another person. Okay, thank you.
Fred Smith's son.
Red.
Reed Smith's son. Yeah. He's out, and then Joe Budd is Senate, and Joe has already, I talked to Joe yesterday. He's already got his stuff in ethics, and he was gonna try to come to committee meeting today, but he couldn't. So we'll get them on board. Anything else? After this meeting, there will be a quick meeting of the ad hoc committee on the agency supplemental funding model. We will go offline, Mallory, and have that meeting. Folks that are not on that committee obviously are welcome to stay. If you want to go ahead and go back to the hotel, whatever your evening plans are, that's fine. Our reservations tonight at the Oak State House at 417 West Hargett Street. That's in, I've not eaten there before, but it's in an apartment complex type building on the ground floor. Parking's nearby. And the reservation starts promptly at 6 o'clock, and they won't have everybody seated by 6:15. So I would say let's plan to meet in the lobby at 5:30. And so we'll be sure to get there on time by 6 o'clock. So we'll reconvene informally to go to dinner at 6:30 in the lobby of the hotel. 5:30 in the lobby. Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
With that,
Meeting adjourned.